Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
We need to talk, my wife Chloe shouted as she stormed into the living room, her voice slicing through the air. We need to talk right now. I looked up at her, managing a faint smile. Honestly, I'd been bracing myself for something like this. I kind of deserved it, maybe. Well, got anything to say for yourself, Colin? She practically shrieked when I didn't respond. Cat got your tongue? No, sweetheart, I replied, doing my best to keep calm. What's going on? Oh, you know exactly what's going on. You cheating a hole. Chloe shot back, her eyes blazing. I just got off the phone with Linda. Well, there it was. Hearing Linda and cheating in the same breath left little to the imagination. Linda was one of her best friends, and like my wife, she was stunning. But with legs that went on forever and a figure that was maybe even a little more tempting. I'd admired her for years, though I'd never imagined actually crossing that line. Until recently. Oh, that was all I managed to say, though it felt ridiculously inadequate given the situation. So you don't deny that you slept with her, then? Chloe demanded, her voice icy and sharp. Would you believe me if I did? I ventured, without much hope. Of course I wouldn't believe it, you idiot, she growled back. So, no point in me denying it, I mumbled, avoiding her gaze. What did she tell you? Everything. She told me everything. Everything? I repeated with a strained smile. Did she mention how many times she screamed my name? How she reacted when I— Shut up, Colin, she screeched, her face flushing. It's bad enough already, and you're going to pay for this? I'm guessing I'm not going to like that, am I? Damn right you won't, she continued, her voice trembling with anger. If you think you can mess around on me, then I can do the same. What? I exclaimed, though I couldn't pretend her reaction was unexpected. You don't mean. That's exactly what I mean. You cheating jerk, she cut in. You slept with another woman. So I'm going to sleep with another man to get back at you. Maybe more than once. Either you accept it, or I'm talking to a divorce lawyer first thing in the morning. I guess you're not leaving me much choice, sweetheart, I said, acknowledging the corner she had me in. Damn right I'm not, Chloe replied, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. All right then, Chloe, I muttered just loud enough for her to hear. I admit it. You've got me. I'll go with the divorce option. Well, I'm glad you can see, she started to say, only to stop as my words sank in. What? What did you just say? Divorce, I repeated, more firmly. I'll go for the divorce option. But you can't, she replied, her tone suddenly uncertain. I can, I said, holding her gaze. But you can't, Colin, Chloe insisted, her voice wavering. I still love you. I don't want that. I still kind of love you too, sweetheart, I said with a hint of sadness. But you gave me a choice, and that's what I've chosen. But you can't, Colin, she repeated, her voice breaking as she fought back tears. I love our life together. I don't want a divorce. I just wanted a little revenge for what you did. And you still can, Chloe, I replied with a wry smile. If we're heading for divorce anyway, why not go ahead and sleep with Tom tonight, like you were planning? What? Tom? How did you? Chloe stammered, shocked and utterly bewildered. Yes, Tom from work, I said, pressing forward. That's who you were planning to get back at me with, wasn't it? Well, she replied hesitantly, her voice shaky, I guess. He might have been the one I had in mind. I certainly hope so, Chloe, I said, wagging my finger at her. I really hope he's the only one you've been seeing behind my back for the past couple of months. A couple of months? Chloe choked, tears springing to her eyes. How could you know? How could I know? I cut in, giving her a look. You started wearing shorter skirts to work, coming home later and later. You went from wanting sex 3 or 4 times a week to barely once in a while. You come home with your shirt barely buttoned, no bra in sight, and I'm supposed to believe you're just having an extra long day at work. Oh, Colin, honey, she began to cry in earnest. It's not what it looks like. We haven't even slept together. I love you. Chloe, I said, keeping my voice steady, I need you to know I put a recorder on the phone. I've listened to your calls with him, so yes, I know you haven't gone all the way. I paused, watching her face fall further, the tears brimming as she realized the full extent of what I'd discovered. And one of the conversations I heard was with Linda, on Tuesday, I continued, watching her wince as I spoke. Smart move, convincing her to seduce me so you'd have an excuse to go after Tom. But here's the thing, Chloe. I saw it coming, but you went through with it, Colin, Chloe said, her voice trembling. Damn right I did. I chuckled. I've always had a thing for Linda, And let me tell you, she didn't disappoint. Who knows? Maybe I'll even have another round with her once all this is over. But doesn't that make us even? She pleaded, her tone edging toward panic. Can't we just drop the talk of divorce? Maybe, I said, stroking my chin as if considering it. But here's the deal. Are you willing to call Tom's wife right now and tell her exactly what you two have been up to? Oh God, Colin. Please don't make me do that, she begged, her face going pale. This time, it's your choice, Chloe, I said, savoring the moment. After a pause, she sighed. All right, I'll do it. And then tell your company, I added. Your boss won't last long once they know he's been having an affair with an employee. You might get fired too, but that's just the price, isn't it? Fine, she whispered, clearly horrified but resigned. She knew the fallout would shatter Tom's life just as much as her own. And about Linda, I said, leaning in, think you could talk her into seducing me again? I don't think she'll agree, Colin, she said, trying to avoid my gaze. Oh, I'm pretty sure she'll agree if you ask her nicely, I said confidently, my grin widening at the memory of that afternoon with Linda. My smile only grew when I saw Chloe nod in reluctant agreement. And I think a threesome would be in order, I added, pushing the boundaries a bit further. And to be clear, I mean with Linda, not Tom. All right, Colin, she replied, desperation clear in her voice. I'll do anything. Anything you want. Just, please don't end our marriage. We'll see. Once you've followed through with everything I've asked, I replied, giving her a hard look. She looked at me, her face etched with worry. What are the chances? She asked softly. I'd say, maybe 50-50, I said with a shrug, leaving her with a glimmer of hope. Colin leaned back, a cold smile spreading across his face as he watched Chloe's hopeful expression, the desperation in her eyes. He let the silence linger, watching her squirm, before finally speaking up. You know, Chloe, he began, his voice dropping its earlier playful tone. I was just kidding about that 50-50 nonsense. I already filed for divorce. Chloe's face drained of color. What do you mean? I mean it's done, he said, his voice hardening. You'll be served the papers soon enough. And honestly, all that talk about doing anything I wanted, it was just me letting you see how pathetic this whole thing has become. But, Colin, she stammered, panic flooding her face, I said I'd do whatever it takes. I'm willing to make it right. I'll call Tom's wife. I'll quit my job. I'll... Save it, Chloe, he interrupted. You already showed me who you are. This marriage is over. You've got tonight to pack your things and leave. She stood frozen, staring at him in disbelief. You can't be serious. Oh, I'm dead serious. You made your choices, and now I'm making mine. So, go ahead, start packing, he said coldly, glancing at his watch. I expect you out by morning. Colin looked at Chloe, his face hardening as he spoke. You know, Chloe, the truth is that even if you haven't actually slept with him yet, the thought was already there in your mind. And let's be real. It's only a matter of time before it comes back. She opened her mouth to protest, but he held up his hand, silencing her. I can't be your guard, he continued, his voice sharp. I can't spend my life trying to keep stupid ideas out of your head, constantly on the lookout, wondering when you're going to cross the line for real. That's no way to live. But, Colin, I swear, I can change, she said, desperation filling her voice. He shook his head. I've made up my mind. Better to end this now than be on edge for the rest of my life, wondering if or when you'll do this again. Tears welled up in her eyes as she tried to find the words, but Colin wasn't swayed. I'm done, Chloe. I've already filed for divorce. You'll be served the papers soon, so I suggest you start packing your things. He watched her face crumble, but his resolve didn't waver. I want you out by morning. Then, without another word, he turned and left the room, leaving her to face the consequences of her choices. When Chloe was served with divorce papers, her initial shock quickly turned into a desperate fight to salvage the marriage. She pleaded with Colin, promising to change, to do whatever it took to regain his trust. She reached out to family and friends, seeking their support and convincing him to give her a second chance. Chloe even pushed hard for marriage counseling, hoping that a professional could help them work through the betrayal and bring them back to the place they once were. Colin, however, was unmoved. For him, the damage was irreparable. He felt that he could never truly trust her again, and that the thought of staying in the marriage would leave him constantly questioning her actions and motives. Her promises, apologies, and even her tearful pleas left him cold. He had made his decision, and his mind wasn't going to change. Over the next 3 years, The divorce process dragged on, complicated by Chloe's refusal to accept that it was truly over. She contested nearly every detail, hoping that by prolonging the process, Colin might reconsider. She tried to remind him of their shared history, the good times they'd had, and even appealed to his emotions, at one point writing him a long letter outlining everything she loved about him. But Colin's resolve never wavered. Chloe tried counseling on her own, working through her feelings and trying to address the issues that had led her to the brink. She hoped that by becoming a better version of herself, she could win Colin back. In the meantime, Colin maintained his distance, choosing to live his life independently, away from her influence. Finally, after over 3 years of emotional battles, legal standoffs, and futile attempts at reconciliation, the divorce was finalized. Colin walked away, feeling a sense of closure, while Chloe was left to rebuild her life without him. The long fight had worn them both down, but for Colin, it was a necessary step to regain his sense of peace and move forward without looking back. Now let's check the second story. Oh Jesus, Alex. None of us saw that coming. I looked up at Bill, who I'd worked alongside for the past 10 years, desperately fighting back tears. It changes nothing, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though it quivered. It changes absolutely nothing. You sure about that, Alex? He asked, a hint of concern in his voice. I'm sure, I replied, glancing over to the other side of the club where Rebecca, my wife of 9 years, was sitting. I'd always considered myself incredibly lucky to be married to a woman like Rebecca, beautiful, with long blonde hair, a toned body, and curves that never failed to take my breath away. I'd fallen for her hard and fast when we first met, and within 6 months, we were married. Over the years, my love for her only deepened, and I was confident she felt the same way about me. That was, until now. What I'd just witnessed had thrown all that into question. With Bill trailing behind me, I walked over to where Rebecca was sitting, laughing and playfully squirming on some guy's lap as he touched her freely, enjoying every moment of it. That son of a... that betrayal. I started to move toward them, but Bill grabbed my arm, stopping me with a warning that I needed to think twice about my next move, especially considering the 7 huge men sitting at their table. He was right. The 7 men in question were the White Twins and their notorious crew, the most feared and ruthless criminals in South London. They were not the kind of people anyone with any sense would want to provoke. Maybe you should step back, Bill advised, his voice low. This isn't even close to over. As he spoke, 3 more young women approached the group, and the guy who had his hands all over my wife, Rebecca, slapped her sharply on the backside and passed her off to another one of the gangsters. The 3 new women spread out among the rest of the men, and within moments, all 4 women were being kissed and groped by the 7 of them. I felt an icy hand clutch my chest as I watched one of them slip his hand under Rebecca's top. Shit. I wasn't sure how much longer I could take it. She was supposed to be at her sister's tonight. I croaked, my voice breaking. I could hardly believe what I was seeing. Out of all the places we could have picked, it had to be this damn club. People at other tables began to turn and look as 2 of the thugs started undoing one of the girls' dresses. Before long, a small crowd had gathered, watching the unfolding scene. It was then that I recognized the woman, now in nothing but a bra and panties, as Nancy, Rebecca's sister. So, this was the life they'd been leading for the past year or so, was it? Twice a week, no less. Ever since her sister's husband had divorced her after catching her in bed with 2 other men. Why hadn't I seen the signs? Why hadn't I suspected anything? Why had I been so naive, giving her so much freedom? I could barely process what I was seeing when Rebecca was lifted up onto the table, encouraged loudly to dance. The man I recognized as Tim White slid his hand under her short skirt, stroking her bare thighs. And did she stop him? Of course not. Rebecca just kept dancing, a sensual smile on her lips as she leaned toward Tim, moving across the table to invite him to touch her more. I was on the edge of losing it. The urge to throw up was overwhelming, but I fought it back, doing my best to keep my stomach in check. Bill, noticing I was about to collapse, grabbed me to steady me. You had no idea, Alex? He asked, his voice filled with disbelief. None at all, I whispered, the truth sinking in like a stone in my gut. A couple of onlookers tried to join in, but they were quickly pushed back and punched in the face. One man, foolish enough to fight back, was dragged off to the back, likely in for a beating. By then, Rebecca and another girl, a slim redhead, had been lifted onto the table together. They started dancing provocatively, laughing and enjoying themselves. Soon, they had undone each other's dresses and were dancing topless, flaunting their bodies to the small crowd, who cheered them on. "Stop, Rebecca," I muttered under my breath. "For God's sake, stop what you're doing." Tim grabbed Rebecca's leg and pulled her toward him, sliding his hand up under her dress. To my shock, Rebecca showed no resistance, laughing as she stepped out of her clothes and kicked them aside. The redhead's dress soon slid down, revealing that she wasn't wearing any underwear. A loud cheer went up from the crowd, and the two girls giggled at the attention. Not wanting to be outdone, Rebecca followed suit, sliding her own dress down until she was just as exposed as her friend. The two of them continued their performance, now fully nude except for their high heels. It was unbearable to watch, and I had to fight the urge to leave, to escape it all. Anything would have been better than staying. Seeing any woman endure such humiliation was difficult enough, but discovering that it was my wife, it was beyond words. "Look, Alex," my friend whispered, discreetly pointing toward the far end of the table. "They're giving that girl something." I followed his gaze and watched in disgust as a young woman, clearly in a vulnerable state, was being fed something by one of the men. It was obvious that they were feeding her some kind of substance, likely fueling a dangerous habit that this group had lured her into. The realization hit me harder than anything, that my wife might have become as caught up in this as the others. It was a crushing thought. What could I do? What did I want to do? What would any man in my position do? Flashes from cameras brought me back to reality. With a heavy sigh, I knew it was time to act. I couldn't just stand there and watch this any longer. "Back me up, Bill," I said, turning to my friend. "It's time to put an end to this." We made our way toward the front. I'm a big guy, and Bill's even bigger, so we had no trouble clearing the path through the onlookers. Eventually, we stood right next to the table, close enough to reach the girls and the men surrounding them. One of the thugs, noticing us, growled, "Keep your distance, a-hole. You can watch, but don't touch. If you do, I'll break your neck." I ignored him and called out to my wife. "Rebecca," I shouted, my voice sharp with disbelief. "What are you doing?" At that moment, Rebecca, along with at least one other girl, was kneeling, and my words seemed to fall on deaf ears. So, I acted. When her back turned to me, I steeled myself and gave her a hard slap on the backside. She screamed in surprise. She screamed, but not as loudly as the man who had been with her. I wasn't sure what he felt, but I imagined he wouldn't be in a rush to experience it again anytime soon. She spun around, ready to yell at me. "You idiot, what are you?" But then she stopped, as if realizing who had slapped her. The look on her face was priceless. Shock, confusion, and shame all mixed together in those brief seconds. Then, chaos erupted. "I warned you, a hole!" The man in front of me shouted, launching himself toward me. But he never got the chance to land the punch. I hadn't mentioned my friend Bill, though. Bill stepped in, catching the guy's punch and quickly neutralizing the threat with one of his own. The crowd, sensing things escalating, quickly scattered, but a few remained, closing in on us. "All right, boss," a voice said from my left. "Let's take them." Tim and his brothers were furious, pushing the women aside in their rush to confront us. I barely had time to pull out my badge, but I managed to get a few words in. "Tim White," I shouted. "You're under arrest for prostitution, drug trafficking, and—" Before I could finish, he lunged at me, but it didn't help. The plainclothes officers who had been in the crowd with us quickly restrained him. By the time the uniformed police arrived a minute later, the fight had already been subdued, and they quickly handled the rest of the situation. Bill and I stood back, watching as the group of disgruntled people in front of us began to disperse. "Detective Inspector," the uniformed sergeant asked, his tone cautious. "What should we do with the women?" "Take them all in," I said firmly without hesitation. "Book them all." "What for?" he asked, now aware that one of them was my wife. "Prostitution, lewd conduct, anything you can charge them with," I growled. "Throw the book at them." Bill and I stepped back as a line of handcuffed gangsters was escorted to the waiting police vans, with the women trailing behind, looking defeated. As my sister's wife passed by, she spat in my direction. It wasn't a good shot, but then, we'd never really gotten along anyway. "Alex, please, Alex," my wife begged as she was led by. "Please don't let them take me away. None of this is what it looks like." I glanced at her and smiled coldly. She'd somehow been shoved back into a dress that didn't fit her well, revealing more than it should. Her figure was on display in a way that reflected everything I'd come to understand about her. "What was it tonight, honey?" I snarled. "A Tupperware party at your sister's?" "No, Alex," she sobbed, tears streaming down her face. "Just let them let me go, and I'll explain everything. Tell it to the judge," I responded coldly. Then, turning on my heel, I walked out of the club, Bill following closely behind, and headed back to my empty house. Another dirty job completed. Alex had always been a man driven by justice. As a detective, he was relentless in his pursuit of criminals, especially those like Tim White, a notorious drug dealer whose operation had been running in South London for years. The pressure was mounting on Tim, as Alex's investigation had begun to get dangerously close to uncovering his network. But Tim, ever resourceful, had anticipated the danger and decided to take a more personal route to protect his business. Knowing that Alex had a soft spot for his wife, Rebecca, Tim devised a plan that would cripple Alex's ability to continue his investigation by exploiting the one weakness that could destroy his resolve. Rebecca, a woman who had always been independent and somewhat careless in her choices, became an easy target. It started with Julie, Rebecca's sister. Julie had already been entangled in Tim's world, a consequence of her failed marriage and an escape from her own misery. Julie had become a willing participant in Tim's operations, and it was she who first introduced Rebecca to the dangerous allure of the club where Tim's gang frequented. At first, it seemed innocent enough. A girls' night out, a few drinks, a bit of fun. But once Rebecca was inside that world, it was hard to step back out. Tim knew exactly what he was doing. He lured Rebecca into the club, where she'd find herself surrounded by men whose intimidation was masked by a false sense of luxury and excitement. At first, the drugs were subtle. A pill slipped into a drink, a line of powder passed casually between friends. But it was enough to hook Rebecca, to get her dependent, to take away her willpower and make her complicit in the chaos that was unfolding. Tim's plan was simple but effective. By getting Rebecca addicted to the drugs his gang distributed, he could ensure that she would be too distracted, too consumed by her own needs, to even consider the consequences of her actions. The more dependent she became, the more likely she would be to keep Alex in the dark about what was really happening. And with her own life spiraling, Alex's investigation would be the furthest thing from her mind. As the drugs took hold of her, Rebecca became more and more a part of the world she was supposed to be avoiding. Her behavior grew erratic, her judgment clouded by the substances she was regularly consuming. The more she gave in, the less she cared about her marriage, or the husband who was on the verge of taking down the very men who were controlling her life. Alex, oblivious to the manipulation at first, began to notice the subtle changes in his wife. She became more distant, more unpredictable. He couldn't put his finger on it, but something about her behavior felt off. And when he started to connect the dots between the people she was hanging out with and Tim White's gang, he grew more suspicious, but his focus was diverted by her erratic behavior. The night at the club was the final straw. It was no coincidence that Rebecca was in the same place where Tim's gang operated freely. It wasn't just about getting Rebecca to give in to the lifestyle. It was about humbling Alex, making him powerless. Tim's men had arranged for Rebecca to be humiliated, to be degraded in front of Alex, to make sure that he would never look at her the same way again. It was a calculated move. Strip away Alex's trust in her, break him emotionally, and make him too weak to continue his investigation. And it worked. By the time Alex arrived at the club, his heart was heavy with the weight of what he saw. His wife, who had once been a symbol of his stable life, was now a pawn in a game far more dangerous than he had imagined. His investigation, which had once seemed so close to cracking, was now a distant thought. His focus was consumed by the emotional devastation of witnessing his wife's transformation, and his desire for justice was overshadowed by personal betrayal. As the chaos unfolded, the gangsters and their women became little more than background noise. Rebecca, in her drugged haze, was unable to fight back. The gang knew exactly what they were doing. Tim had succeeded in distracting Alex from the truth, that the real crime was happening under his nose, and now, it was too late to stop it. By the time Alex had recovered enough to act, it was already over. The damage was done. Rebecca was in too deep, and Alex was left with a choice. Continue with the investigation and risk losing everything, or turn his back on the case to save the woman who had already been lost to the very criminals he had been trying to take down. Tim had won. Alex was no longer the hunter. He was the prey. The day Alex filed for divorce, it felt like a personal defeat, but he knew it was the only way forward. His mind had been consumed with thoughts of Rebecca's betrayal, her addiction, and the slow unraveling of everything he had worked for. He had watched helplessly as she spiraled deeper into the grip of Tim White's drugs, her body and mind no longer her own. The woman he had loved and trusted, the woman he had built a life with, had become a stranger. He was no longer sure if he was fighting to save her, or if he was fighting for the family he had lost. Rebecca's reaction was predictable. She begged. she pleaded, but Alex's resolve had hardened over the weeks. He had seen the way she had humiliated herself, how she had betrayed their marriage for the allure of the very world he had been fighting to bring down. Her dependency on the drugs, on Tim's manipulation, had robbed her of everything: her dignity, her strength, her integrity. The woman who had once stood beside him had become a hollow shell, and Alex couldn't save her anymore. The divorce proceedings were swift, but emotionally draining. The papers were signed, and the finality of it hit Alex like a physical blow. It was hard to explain, even to himself, how he felt. There was anger, sadness, betrayal, but also a strange sense of relief. Relief that he was no longer caught in the vicious cycle, no longer tethered to someone who had made choices that had destroyed their life together. Rebecca was left to face the consequences of her actions alone. Alex left the house, the home they had built together, and moved into a small apartment in the city. It was a fresh start, or at least that was what he told himself. He buried himself in his work, the investigation he had been so determined to finish before everything fell apart. But his mind often drifted back to Rebecca, to the chaos that had consumed her, and to the unanswered question of what would happen to her now that he was no longer there. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
He stood in front of me, hands raised, fists clenched, and his feet moving like a seasoned fighter. For me, it was fight or flight. I took off my cap, and for a moment he froze. Dear listeners, today we bring a story of a man cheated on by his wife with a martial artist and puts her husband in a very dangerous situation. My name is Dustin. I am a 35-year-old man. I was married to Kathy, who was 32 when we got divorced. I work as an engineer at a local company and make a decent amount of money every month. We have a 6-year-old son, Ron. I met my wife through a common friend who introduced us. We kept in touch and later started dating. After dating for about 3 years, we decided to get married. We had our honeymoon in Phuket, Thailand. At our honeymoon, my wife was staring at all the Asian men and asked me, "These guys are smaller than an average white man. They must be small, between the legs, right?" I took that as a silly question and laughed it out. Kathy was always the one into fitness. She used to regularly visit the gym and tries to stay fit. When Kathy was pregnant, I took extra care for her. I used to cook, at times feed her in bed. I tried my best to pamper her during her pregnancy, as my mother told me that I need to keep her happy for the baby to be a bright one. Once Ron was born, I knew it was time for me to start pushing myself at work, as now I needed a ton of money. Once Ron was 5-year-old, Kathy started to go to the gym as she wanted to lose the fat she gained during her pregnancy. This is where my life took turn for the worst. In 2 months, Kathy had lost almost 20 pounds and I was shocked at her transformation. I used to see her get better every day, but did not realize the amount of weight that she lost was that high. I asked her what is the secret for the weight loss. She explained that she was not training martial arts and that helped her lose weight. I was inspired and decided to go back to my old gym that I used to train at. I started training, and in a few months I too was getting physically better, but I was not losing weight like my wife. One day I asked my wife if I can come train with her trainer and lose some weight. She was a bit taken aback and stated that the batch was full and they are not taking any more trainees. I was a bit shocked and brushed it off and did not put a lot of thought at it. A few days later, I was leaving for home when the front desk lady asked me to wait. She told me that some guy came looking for me. I asked if that guy left a message. She said no. I asked how did he look like. She said that it was an Asian guy with a tattoo on his neck. I brushed it off as I did not know any such guy. A day later, my wife asked me if I would like to go watch a Muay Thai match. She said that she has front row pass. I was surprised and asked how did she get front row pass to a Muay Thai event. She stated that her trainer is competing. I said yes, as it was an exciting event and I have never seen a Muay Thai match up close. So, here we were at the event, and after 3 fights, it was her trainer's turn. It was a 150-pound fight. The fighters stepped in the ring, and I noticed that both fighters had tattoos on their neck. I laughed at the coincidence, and that someone came to my office with that tattoo was funny. So, the bell rang and Kathy's trainer knocked out the opponent within 15 seconds. The fight was one-sided, and the winner was celebrating. I excused for a quick pee. I came back, and from a distance I saw my wife was hugging that fighter. I was angry, and at the same time I was thinking maybe it is because that the guy is her trainer. Things like that happens among team members. While going home, I asked my wife, why did she hug the guy? She stated that it was her trainer and it was just a small hug. Not that I am sleeping with. She was angry and did not speak to me that night. At home, she stated that I ruined her mood, and she was happy that her trainer won, but I ruined that as well. I apologized and tried to sort the situation. That night, I woke up and did not find my wife in my bed. I started to look for her, and I saw her in the kitchen. She had her phone on the kitchen table and was standing naked. She was on a video call with someone. I heard her say, "This is your prize for today." I walked up to the phone, picked it up, and saw that she was making a video and had not sent to anyone. Before I could check it, she said that she was making that for me. Since we had a fight, she wanted to make it up to me. I walked up to her and turned her on the kitchen table and made sure it was one of the best she ever had. Once I was done, she collapsed on the floor and was panting hard. She said, "We should do this more often." I was foolish to believe her that night. Next morning, I woke up happy and went to the gym to train. I trained hard that day. It was cold, so I was wearing a beanie cap and had a hood over my head. Once I was done, I walked out of the gym to go home. As I approached my car, I noticed a man walking towards me. He appeared to be about 170 centimeters tall, and as he got closer, I realized that he was Kathy's trainer. With a confident and almost unsettling demeanor, he stopped in front of me, looked me straight in the eye, and said something that caught me completely off guard. "I need to tell you something," he began with a smug grin. "I'm in love with your wife. Every single day, twice a day, I make love to her. I send her home carrying my seed, and I want you to know that. From now on, you are to leave her alone. Don't touch her. She's mine now." His words were sharp and deliberate, intended to provoke me, and the intensity of his gaze made it clear that he believed every word he said. It was as though he wanted to shatter my world right then and there. I was left speechless, utterly shocked by his words. My face must have shown my confusion and disbelief because, just then, two of my training partners arrived, noticing something was off. They asked what was going on, but before I could respond, the guy started throwing insults and threats my way. He demanded that I walk away from my wife, or he'd beat me up right then and there. I was still in shock, trying to process everything he was saying. I had no idea what he was talking about, or why he was so intent on confronting me like this. My training partners were closing in, ready to step in, but I gestured for them to hold back. I looked the guy in the eye and told him he needed to be clear about what he was saying and asked if he was sure he wanted to deal with me. With a cold, confident voice, he repeated, "Kathy is my love. I want her for myself." Then, with a dramatic flair, he took off his jacket, throwing it to the side, and squared up for a fight. He positioned himself directly in front of me, hands raised, fists clenched, his footwork quick and controlled like someone who knew how to handle himself in a fight. At that moment, it was a clear choice, fight or flight. I felt the adrenaline surge, and without saying a word, I calmly took off my cap. The guy froze for a second, his eyes drawn to my cauliflower ears, a badge of my years of combat training. Anyone familiar with fighting would understand that this wasn't my first time facing a challenge. But despite that warning, he shook his head and raised his fists again, ready to escalate things. You see, I'm a former high school wrestler, standing 6 feet 3 inches tall and weighing almost 260 pounds. And here's this guy, probably no more than 150 pounds, threatening me, telling me he's going to beat me up. The absurdity of it all only added to the tension, but it was clear he wasn't backing down. So, I decided to match his energy. I calmly took off my jacket and got ready, preparing myself for whatever was about to come next. This wasn't going to end with words. As soon as I took off my jacket and squared up, he wasted no time. He lunged forward and threw a punch, aiming right for my face. The hit landed, slicing open my eyebrow, and almost instantly, I felt the warm trickle of blood running down my face. It stung, but it wasn't the pain that got me. It was the audacity of this guy. He stood there, barely catching his breath, and with a cocky grin, he asked, "You want more?" Before he could even finish his sentence, I had already moved. Years of wrestling instinct kicked in, and I shot for a double leg takedown. I wrapped his legs and lifted him clean off the ground. He must have been at least 6 feet in the air before he knew what was happening. There's a sinking feeling you get when you're picked up like that, helpless, with the ground rapidly coming up to meet you. And when he hit, the impact was brutal. His body slammed into the pavement with a thud, and the sound of his breath getting knocked out of his lungs was unmistakable. He gasped, wide-eyed, like he was drowning in airless space. But I wasn't done. I could see the fear in his eyes as he struggled to regain his composure, but I gave him no time. I hoisted him back up, this time driving him down onto the hood of his own car. The sound of metal buckling beneath his body echoed through the street as the car's bonnet crumpled under the force. The impact left a deep dent, and I could hear the groaning of twisted metal as his body lay sprawled across it. For a second, I thought he might stay down, But the rage in me wasn't satisfied yet. I grabbed him again, lifted him effortlessly like a rag doll, and slammed him back down, this time even harder. The car hood caved in further, and with that final crash, he was done. His body was limp, crumpled like a piece of discarded paper, lying there motionless as the reality of what had just happened set in. He had come at me with all that bravado, but now, the fight was drained out of him. Blood still dripped from my face, but I stood over him, adrenaline pumping through my veins, as he lay there broken, defeated, and realizing just how big a mistake he had made. After the fight, my friends came up to me, concerned but also supportive. They told me they had seen everything and would back me up if that guy tried to file a complaint. One of them had even recorded the whole thing on video, capturing the moment when the arrogant trainer got the beating of his life. With evidence on my side, I knew I had nothing to worry about. But deep down, I could sense that the day wasn't over yet. There were more secrets waiting to surface, ones that might be even more shocking than what had just unfolded. When I got home, I felt the weight of everything hanging over me. I poured myself a glass of water, letting the cool liquid settle me. My phone buzzed, and it was my friend, sending over the video of the fight. I watched it briefly, seeing the trainer's arrogance crumble as he hit the ground again and again, and knew I had to confront Kathy with this. I found her in the house, looking relaxed and completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit. I asked her to sit down with me. Trying to keep my composure, I smiled slightly and said, "I've got something to show you." I handed her my phone and hit play. At first, she smiled back, probably thinking it was just something casual or funny. But as the video played, the look on her face changed. Her smile slowly faded, replaced by shock and horror as she realized what she was watching. She saw the fight, the brutal takedown, the smashed car, and the trainer lying there like a broken doll. The reality of the situation dawned on her as she watched in stunned silence. Her eyes met mine, and I could see the panic behind them, as if she knew there was no way to explain away what had just unfolded. As soon as the video ended, Kathy's reaction was immediate. Tears streamed down her face, and she lashed out at me, shouting, "Why did you beat him up?" Her anger and hurt were palpable, but I wasn't going to let that deflect what needed to be addressed. I looked her dead in the eye and asked the question that had been burning inside me ever since the fight. "Why did you sleep with him?" The shock in her expression told me everything. She hadn't expected me to know. The room went dead silent for a moment as she struggled to find words. I pressed further, repeating exactly what her affair partner had said to me earlier. "He told me he loves you, that he sleeps with you every day, twice, and sends you home carrying his seed." At that moment, her tears turned to sobs, and she broke down, barely able to get her words out. "I was just curious," she cried. My voice rose, filled with frustration and betrayal. "Curious? For what?" She wiped her eyes, struggling to explain. "Ever since I started training with AP, I don't know, curious. Curious if Asian men are good in bed." Her confession hit me like a gut punch. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She continued, her words stumbling out between sobs. "It started with just small flirting at first. One day during training, I accidentally kicked AP in the groin. I apologized, of course, and after the session, I went to his office to say sorry again. That's when things escalated. He flirted with me, and even showed me where I had kicked him." Her face was a mess of tears, and her voice quivered as she tried to explain what happened next. "I don't know what came over me," she whispered. "One moment, I was apologizing, and the next, we were having sex. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did." The room felt heavy with the weight of her confession. I stood there, my mind spinning, trying to comprehend how things had spiraled so far out of control. The betrayal, the lies, the complete absurdity of it all. It was too much to take in at once. Kathy's confession wasn't over. Through her tears, she admitted that this affair had been going on ever since the first time. She said she loved me, and that I was her only real love. Desperately, she tried to rationalize what had happened, insisting that it was just casual sex, a physical fling with some random guy. She begged me not to think too much about it, saying that since there was no emotional attachment, just lust, it could be overlooked. I stood there, silent. Her words washed over me, but they didn't ease the pain. She was trying to make it sound like this was just a meaningless mistake, something that could be swept under the rug. But the weight of her betrayal, the deliberate choices she made, couldn't be brushed aside so easily. My mind raced, filled with anger, confusion, and disbelief. Without saying a word, I grabbed my phone and dialed her mother. Kathy watched, her eyes widening in disbelief, but she didn't try to stop me. When her mother picked up, I laid it all out, telling her everything about the affair, the lies, and the betrayal. I could hear her mother's breath catch on the other end of the line as she started crying. Kathy exploded in anger. "Why did you tell my mother?" Her voice was shrill, full of rage and disbelief, but I stayed calm. I looked her in the eyes and with a cold, steady voice, said, "Just think of it as me telling her a casual story." That response struck her deeply, almost as if she realized the weight of her own hypocrisy in that moment. Her rage escalated, filling the room with her screaming, but I was strangely calm. It was as if a dam had broken inside me, and all the emotion I had built up was gone. I sat down, and as she kept yelling, I felt a strange silence. I could see her mouth moving, her gestures animated, but I couldn't hear a word. It was as if the world had muted around me. I just watched her, feeling detached, like I was no longer part of the chaos unraveling in front of me. After what felt like an eternity but was only a few seconds, I snapped back into reality. The sound of her voice came flooding back in, but by then, I had already made my decision. I looked her in the eyes, still calm, and said, "Get out. Talk to a lawyer and start the negotiations." My words hung in the air, final and cold. There was no more room for discussion, no more rationalizing, no more tears. She had crossed a line that couldn't be undone, and now there was only one path forward. I stood by my decision, knowing that this chapter of my life had come to an end. Kathy fell to her knees, pleading now. "Think of our son," she begged through her tears. "You'll ruin his life if we get divorced." I couldn't help but smile bitterly at her words. "That's a very valid point," I said calmly. "I wonder if you thought about our son while you were screwing that fighter." My voice was sharp, cutting through the tension. "I hope the sex was good, and I hope you treasure every memory of every climax you had with him, because soon enough, I'll be sending a formal complaint to his gym. He'll be jobless, and maybe he'll crawl back to Thailand. Or better yet, if he loves you so much, he can take you with him." The weight of my words hit her like a punch. She sobbed harder, but I was done. "Now, pack your bags and get out of my house." I didn't wait for her response. I just turned and walked away, feeling an eerie calm settle over me. As I headed toward the door, I added, "Don't wake our son. Be gone by the time I get back." With that, I left the house, not looking back at her tear-streaked face. Once outside, I called her mother again and told her everything, explaining the situation in full. "I'll be divorcing your daughter," I said, making my decision clear. There was no turning back from here. When I returned home, I saw Kathy leaving with her mother. The weight of everything hit me as I walked inside, the house now eerily quiet. I checked on my son, still peacefully asleep, completely unaware of the storm brewing around him. My heart sank. The reality of what this would mean for him, the trauma of a broken home, the uncertainty of the future, washed over me like a tidal wave. I couldn't hold back the emotion any longer. I collapsed onto the floor near his bed, curling up as tears silently streamed down my face. I cried for him, for the life we once had, and for everything that had been shattered. The next morning, I gathered myself and met with the lawyer. I laid out everything, explaining the situation in detail and sharing the video of the fight. He watched, his expression shifting between disbelief and sympathy. "This is quite something," he said, clearly surprised at how things had unfolded. But he was professional and focused. He assured me that he would do everything in his power to help secure custody of my son, knowing how much this mattered to me. Before I left, he advised me to send a formal complaint to the gym where Kathy had trained, detailing the affair and what had happened. It was another step toward closing this painful chapter and holding those involved accountable. I contacted the gym via email, and in time, they decided to fire that AP. As a result, he also lost his fight contracts with the promotions he was signed to. The video of me overpowering him spread quickly in underground circles, gaining quite a bit of attention. Since then, I haven't spoken to Kathy at all. The court awarded her custody of our child, which broke my heart. On top of that, I had to hand over the house to her as part of the alimony settlement. Now, I'm also paying monthly child support. Kathy's meddling completely turned my life upside down, emotionally and financially. I often feel the urge to leave this city and start fresh somewhere else, but I'm trapped by the need to be close to my son. I can't bear the thought of not having him in my life. At the same time, having to deal with Kathy regularly is incredibly frustrating and painful. But then something happened out of the blue. Kathy has been bringing her lover home. It's a violation of the court order. As part of the custody agreement, It was explicitly stated that neither of us was allowed to introduce romantic partners into our home life when our son is present. My son called me on one such night. I quickly contacted Child Protective Services, CPS, and reported Kathy's repeated disregard for the court's conditions. That same night when CPS arrived to assess the situation, they caught Kathy and her lover together in my home. They further launched an investigation, during which it became clear that Kathy's behavior was not in line with her obligations as a custodial parent. The investigation led to both Kathy and her lover being arrested for violating the court's custody agreement and for endangering the emotional well-being of our child. Her inability to follow the court's rules, combined with the findings from CPS, resulted in the court revoking her custody rights. With full custody of my son, life has found some stability. We live together with our 2 German shepherds, who are protective and always by our side. Things aren't always easy, but having my son and the dogs brings a sense of peace. We're starting fresh, focusing on creating a safe and loving home. Kathy spent some time in jail, and when she gets visitation with our son, it's under strict supervision. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
I believe that where you come from shapes who you become, and my journey started before I was born. In the late 1970s, my parents left West Germany seeking better opportunities. They immigrated to Canada with dreams of a new life, and my mother was pregnant with me when they arrived in Montreal. My father, a trained goldsmith, quickly found work, and they began building a future not just for themselves, but for the family they were starting. Growing up, I heard stories about the sacrifices they made. My father's dedication led to a comfortable life for us. And by the time my brother Michael was born, he had opened his own jewelry shop in the West End, a testament to his hard work. We lived well in Beaconsfield, but I knew their journey hadn't been easy. My name is Jacob Faltz, though most people call me Jake. My parents left West Germany in 1979, before reunification, and settled in Montreal, where I was born. My father found work as a goldsmith, and a few years later, my brother Michael was born. Life flourished as my father opened his own jewelry store, allowing us to live comfortably. They now spend winters in Florida. I was an average student, more interested in girls and hockey than studies. I struggled to find a job in French-speaking Quebec with only adequate spoken French. Eventually, I joined a Vancouver-based building materials company in customer service. A year later, I transferred to Vancouver, where my French skills surprisingly helped me land the job. I immediately fell in love with the city, its modern vibe, beaches, and mountains. I made friends through work and hockey. I joined a beer league and ended up as a first-line defenseman because I could skate backward. It was fun and kept me fit. At the end of the season, I met Judy Hansen at a team barbecue. Like me, she was from Montreal. We hit it off, exchanged numbers, and started dating. Judy was attractive, with short, dark brown hair and a slim figure. Within a year, I proposed, and after some discussion about our future, she accepted. We had been physical engaged for months, and while Judy was a bit conventional, we both seemed satisfied. Judy worked as a lab technician, conducting medical tests for private clinics across the province. She was proud of her hard-earned position and enjoyed both the work and her colleagues, who were all women except for their boss, Bob Turnbull. When we planned our future, we calculated that if I secured the sales job, our combined income would be close to $90,000, potentially enough to buy a house in the competitive market. Judy accepted my proposal on the condition that I got the job, and a few months later, I did. We set a wedding date and shared the news with our families. While my parents were thrilled, Judy's parents were more cautious, though they eventually made plans to attend the wedding. We got married in a small suburban church and honeymooned briefly in Victoria and Seattle before returning to our rented apartment. I worked hard in my new sales role, meeting my targets, while Judy continued at the lab with her more predictable hours. Despite our different schedules, life was smooth, and we saved enough to buy a townhouse in the suburbs, celebrating our 3rd anniversary shortly after moving in. We talked about starting a family, but Judy insisted on waiting until we were more financially stable, though she never specified when that would be. As with many marriages, our sex life gradually slowed down. Before marriage, we were physical engaged 4 or 5 times a week, but after 3 years, it dropped to once or twice a week. I eventually brought it up with Judy, but her response was defensive, suggesting that work was tiring us out. Though I missed our earlier frequency, I adjusted to the new pace, realizing that not all couples always want the same things at the same time. Overall, we seemed happy and on track for a successful marriage. It may seem surprising, But I developed a close friendship with a woman, Cindy Willows, after she and her husband Al moved in next door. Despite being best friends, there was no romantic or sexual element between us. Cindy was a stay-at-home mom with 2 elementary-aged children, while Al worked as a car salesman. She had a sharp wit, a no-nonsense attitude, and a bold sense of humor. Cindy, slightly taller than Judy with reddish blonde hair and blue eyes, often joked about how Al did the honorable thing by marrying her after she got pregnant. They had 2 kids, Annabeth, a 10-year-old in 5th grade, and Bradley, a 7-year-old in 2nd grade. Cindy sometimes called her husband Alvin when annoyed, but most knew him as Al. He was about 6 feet tall, with curly red hair, a ruddy complexion, and flashy style, bright suits, a Rolex knockoff, and a gold ring. Al seemed to believe this was the ideal car salesman look, and his upbeat, always-on personality could be either endearing or irritating. Unfortunately, I found him more annoying, though Judy was neutral toward him. However, I liked Cindy's straightforwardness, and we became good friends over time. I also liked her kids. Annie, as she was often called, was polite and charming, destined to be a heartbreaker. Brad was playful and always cheerful, with good manners that I appreciated. Judy, however, kept her distance from them, which made me wonder if she was signaling a reluctance to have children. If we were going to start a family, I hoped our kids would be like Annie and Brad. Things took a downturn last spring. After 6 years of marriage and nearly saving enough for a house, I was suddenly laid off when my company was sold and the branch closed. The news shocked me, and Judy's reaction was one of anger and disappointment, as if I had failed her. It was a tough blow to my morale. I began job hunting immediately, but opportunities in my field were scarce. Judy would leave for work with a quick kiss, while I spent my days searching for jobs and feeling increasingly discouraged. After 2 frustrating weeks, I was feeling low when Cindy appeared one morning. "Hey, handsome, got any more coffee?" she asked with her usual playful spirit. She often called me handsome, even in front of Al and Judy, and they didn't seem to mind. I invited her in, and as we chatted, I told her about losing my job. Cindy, in her blunt way, acknowledged how tough it was, but immediately started thinking of ways to help. Unlike Judy, who seemed distant, Cindy was actively concerned. She asked about my best subject in school, and I mentioned English, especially writing. Cindy then mentioned a friend who worked from home writing manuals and turning down business due to high demand. She suggested I talk to her friend about potential opportunities. "Great, thank you, Cindy," I said, appreciating her willingness to help. Her name was Paula Woods, and when Cindy handed me the phone, I caught her at the perfect time. I offered to call back later, but she was on a break and happy to chat since I was a friend of Cindy's. Paula shared that she had been in a similar situation, unemployed and in need of work, when she found an ad for a job writing manuals and instructions for an import-export business. The company needed someone to create clear English instructions for products from China, as the translations they were receiving were comically bad. Paula took the job and never looked back. "They're also looking for someone who can translate into French," Paula said. "They've been using an expensive translation service, but they need someone in-house who can both write and translate. It's especially tough with the machinery manuals." She gave me the agency's name and her contact, and I asked if I could mention her name. She agreed, and I handed the phone back to Cindy while I poured us both more coffee. "Cindy, you and Paula might have just saved my life. I can't thank you enough," I said. "No need. It was nice to see you perk up again. You looked pretty down earlier," she replied. "Yeah, well, Judy hasn't fully grasped our situation yet. She's not thrilled about me being out of work. It's really messed up our plans." "Jake, you didn't get fired. This happens to people all the time. It's just how things are now. Al's come home down before too, but I give him a pep talk and, well, a little fun, and he's back at it the next day," she laughed. "Sounds like a good strategy," I said, feeling envious that Cindy could handle things that way when Judy was so negative. I called the number Paula gave me and spoke with Mr. Lewis. I mentioned Paula's name and offered to provide a free sample of my work. He was interested and asked if I could meet him that afternoon. We set an appointment for 2 p.m., and I was so relieved that I hugged Cindy nearly in tears. "You don't know how good this feels, Cindy." "Glad to help," she replied with a grin. Cindy left around 11, and I quickly showered, shaved, and dressed in a clean shirt, navy blazer, and tan slacks. I didn't change until after lunch to avoid any spills. I met with Mr. Louis at 2 p.m. He was a balding mid-50s Asian man in a rumpled suit, which made me wonder if he was looking for cheap labor. But since Paula had spoken highly of him, I gave him a chance. He explained that he imports machines from China and Thailand, ranging from plastics manufacturing to woodworking. The Chinese to English translations were so bad that even he couldn't understand them, despite reading the original Chinese. He needed clear English instructions for his customers and French translations to sell in Quebec. The high cost of translation services wasn't providing the quality he needed, especially since they didn't understand the machinery. He was looking for someone who could do both. I understand your situation. Let's give it a try, and if I can do the job, we can agree on a fair fee. Sound good? I suggested. Yes, that works for me. I hope you can handle this because it would be a great help to my business, and I'll make sure it's worth your while, he assured me. Why don't you give me a sample to work on? I can either do it here or take it home and return it when it's done. He smiled and said, My computer is a bit outdated. It's better if you use yours and let me know when you're finished. Then we can review the results. Great. Show me the instructions, and I'll get started. He handed me a thin folder from a stack and led me into his warehouse, filled with crates and machinery. This is the machine the instructions are for. Look it over and ask if you have any questions. I compared the drawings in the manual to the actual machine. They matched, but I asked, how accurate are these drawings? Most are good, but sometimes they send old drawings with new machines, which causes issues. I can't sell machines without the correct drawings. It's bad for business. I can see that. These seem accurate. So I'll start on the instructions. If I hit any snags, I'll call. This first job is a trial run to see if I can do the work and if it's a viable job for me. He nodded with a smile. A wise approach. I left, excited about the potential of this new opportunity. It wasn't related to my previous job, but it seemed more interesting. If it worked out, I was sure I'd be happier. However, Judy wasn't as optimistic. What do you know about machinery? How can you make money from this? She questioned. I know someone who's already doing it successfully and working from home, which I'd like to do. Oh, great. You'll sit around all day while I work hard in the lab. Why do you think that? Working from home would save us money, no commuting costs. It seems like a good situation. Show me you can actually earn a living, Jake. I have my doubts. If it were that easy, everyone would be doing it. Remember, I have a mechanical mind and writing skills. Plus, I'm bilingual. That's rare here. I think I have a good shot, but I need to try. How much is this guy paying you? Nothing yet. It's a free trial to prove I can do the job. Once I know what my time is worth, I'll set a price. Great. You're working for nothing on a job you don't even know if you can do. Fantastic, she said, stomping off to the kitchen. Her reaction deflated my enthusiasm, but I was determined to prove myself. After dinner, I went straight to our home office and began working on the instructions. The English version was so poorly translated that it was almost impossible to understand. I took a deep breath and started rewriting. By midnight, after pushing through a headache and stiff neck, I had finished a page and a half of the 6-page instructions. It was slow progress, but I was finding a rhythm. Exhausted, I headed to bed, took a couple of Tylenol, and quickly fell asleep, satisfied with my effort. When I woke up, Judy was already dressed and having her usual yogurt and granola breakfast. As expected, there was no coffee since she doesn't drink it. I greeted her and she mumbled something in return. After a quick peck on the cheek, she left for work at 7:10 a.m. I went to our office, reviewed last night's work, fixed a few small errors, and continued where I left off. I was on my second or third cup of coffee when I heard Cindy's familiar voice. Yoo-hoo! It's me again, handsome, she called from the back door with a smile in her voice. Come on in, Cindy. Grab a coffee. I'm in my office. She entered, sarcastically commenting on my appearance. I was still in my t-shirt and boxers. Just because I haven't shaved or dressed doesn't mean I'm a slob, I joked back. Cindy laughed and asked, What you working on? Page 3 of 6. Translating instructions for the Heavenly Blossom Model 356K 14 thickness planer, I replied with exaggerated seriousness. Cindy burst out laughing. Where do they get these goofy names? I shrugged. No idea, but this is tougher than I thought. I spent 5 hours last night just getting through a page and a half. It's going faster now, though. Should finish by noon and then start on the French. And you're doing this for free? She asked, sounding like Judy. Yeah, Judy wasn't impressed either. But it's the results that will matter. I'll know soon if this is worth pursuing. Good luck, Jake. I believe you're going to surprise Judy, Cindy said, always direct and supportive. After a brief silence, Cindy asked, Jake, can I ask you something personal? Sure, go ahead. Do you think you and Judy are really happy? I paused, staring at my coffee. It's a good question, Cindy. A damn good one. I left it at that. By 11:30 a.m., I finished the English version and called Mr. Louis. letting him know I'd have the French done by the afternoon. He was pleased and told me to come by any time. That boosted my confidence. After a quick lunch and some help from my dictionary, I finished the French version by 2:30 p.m. I double-checked both versions and found no errors. I dressed in business clothes and headed to Mr. Lewis's office. He reviewed my English version, occasionally nodding and making minor notes. Finally, he looked up. "Excellent, Mr. Jake. I'll send your versions for verification. If your French checks out, we have a deal." He then asked how many hours I spent on the work. When I told him 11, he said, "I'll have a check for $660 ready tomorrow." I reminded him that this was supposed to be a free trial, but he insisted, "I don't take advantage of good work. I believe we can do good business together." He also advised me to incorporate my business to avoid future tax issues and protect myself from liability. I thanked him sincerely and asked him to inform me of any problems with the French version. As I was about to leave, he surprised me by asking, "Don't you want your next assignment?" "Of course," I stammered, eager to continue. He smiled and said, "I'm confident your French version will be as good as your English. Thanks to Miss Paula for introducing you." He handed me another manual, and we reviewed the machine in the back. After confirming the drawings were current, we shook hands, and I left with a spring in my step. At $60 an hour, a 40-hour week would gross over $120,000 a year. Seeing the stack of work on Mr. Lewis's desk, I felt optimistic. When I told Judy, the substantial pay rate seemed to improve her mood, and she even suggested we celebrate that night. I was feeling much better about our future and eager to tell Cindy, who had sparked the idea. The next morning, I started on the new manual, which was easier due to my experience and the simpler machine. I finished the English version by 1 p.m. and the French before dinner, 8 hours total. The following morning, I called Mr. Louis, who was pleased with my work and eager for the next project. I delivered it to him later that day. "Mr. Lewis, can we arrange a system where I don't have to drive in daily? I could work on a week's worth at a time and email the finished translations." He agreed and suggested direct deposit for payments, which I appreciated, though I needed to set up a business account first. We discussed drafting a contract, and I told him I'd consult my business advisor. After reviewing 5 new manuals and machines, I noted one omission, but found the job straightforward. By the end of the week, I had a new career in business, Precise Word Services. I filed for a GST license, opened a business account, printed business cards, and designed letterhead. On my lawyer's advice, I drafted a letter of understanding for Mr. Louis outlining our agreement and hourly rate. I also bought a color laser printer as a business expense. By Thursday, I completed and returned 5 manuals and picked up 6 more, reviewing the machines before leaving. I wondered how many machines Mr. Lewis had as I booked 46 hours that week, earning nearly $4,000. With Friday's work, I would likely double that amount. I was working nonstop in my home office. Judy barely saw me except during dinner, where we had brief conversations. For the first few weeks, she shifted from disdain to curiosity about my new job, asking questions like, "How often do you get paid?" "I get paid per job. I'm a contractor, so I handle my own taxes and expenses," I explained. She then hinted at needing money. "Can you spare $1,000? Things are tight since you lost your job." "Sure," I agreed cautiously, even though my business was already bringing in about $3,000 a week. I transferred $1,000 from my business account to our joint checking account. Judy seemed surprised, but pleased. It felt good to contribute again, even though I hadn't been out of work long. I decided to meet with Mr. Louis to gauge the future of this business. He reassured me that more complex machines were on the way, meaning plenty of work ahead. Relieved, I knew I could relax a bit. On a warm day, Cindy stopped by as usual. She greeted me with a smile. "Hey, handsome, where have you been?" I beckoned her over, replying, "Come on over and I'll tell you," content with how things were unfolding. As Cindy joined me, I couldn't resist sharing some news with a hint of pride. "You're now speaking to the president of Precise Word Services, Inc., Jacob R. Faltz." She laughed off my announcement. "Yeah, right, the president. Sure, Jake." We shared a lighthearted moment before she remarked, "It's good to see you happy. It's been a while." Acknowledging her observation, I admitted, "Yeah, it feels like a weight's been lifted. I can move forward again." Her curiosity piqued. She inquired, "How does Judy feel about it?" I met her gaze, confessing, "She doesn't really know." Cindy seemed puzzled. "You mean she can't decide?" "No," I clarified. "I haven't told her how well the business is doing." She paused briefly before responding, "Oh." I then reminded her, "Cindy, remember when you asked if Judy and I were really happy? She nodded. Yeah. Reflecting on our situation, I confided. I'm not so sure anymore. I haven't lied to her, but I haven't told her everything either. Why not? She pressed. I shrugged, uneasy. I don't know. I just have this feeling something's off. After a thoughtful pause, I posed a hypothetical question. If you were in my place making good money, would you tell Al? Cindy considered my question, then replied, Jake, that's a tough question. We live on Al's commissions, and it's hard sometimes. I'd hate to think he'd hold out on me. I expressed my concern. Yeah, that's what's bothering me. I'm holding out on Judy, and I'm not sure why. Cindy responded matter-of-factly, That's easy. You don't trust her. I asked, seeking affirmation, You think? She was confident in her observation. I know. I can tell something's wrong between you two, and I'm pretty sure it's not you. Curious, I asked her, Why do you say that? Cindy was frank. I know you, Jake. You're straightforward, no nonsense. I've noticed how Judy treats you when she thinks no one is watching. She acts like she married beneath her. I don't know why, but that's what I see. I murmured thoughtfully. Her parents? Cindy inquired, What about them? I explained, They don't think much of me. Maybe it's rubbing off on her. Cindy scoffed. Are her parents royalty or something? No, her dad's a city employee, and her mom works part-time at a market. Definitely not royalty, I clarified. Cindy, frustrated, advised, Then they should be grateful she married someone who treats her well. You deserve better. I sighed, pondering. Maybe they had higher expectations for her. As Cindy leaned back, she asked, So, what now? I confessed, I don't know. I still love her, but it feels like she's given up on me. I hope I'm wrong. Cindy responded softly, I hope so too, Jake. Though there were no signs Judy was having an affair, I began to worry. A few weeks later, she mentioned working overtime due to a reorganization at the lab. We seemed to be drifting apart, which made me sad. I was nearing 28, and we hadn't started a family, and I wondered if we ever would. I cut back on night work to spend more time with Judy, hoping to reconnect. I also began contributing $800 to $1,000 a week to our joint account, explaining that the business was now stable. Despite our improved finances, our relationship remained distant. We made love only once or twice a week, and no amount of effort on my part could change that. Meanwhile, my business with Mr. Louis was thriving. He regularly praised my work, and as I became more efficient, I found time for myself. Occasionally, I'd take a break to enjoy a lunch out or a beer at the local bar. After our intense conversation weeks earlier, Cindy and I didn't see each other much until I started inviting her over for morning coffee. It became our daily time to talk openly, without worrying about being overheard. One day, Cindy asked, How's Judy? Same, distant, I replied. Do you think you two will make it? I want to keep trying, but I'm not sure, I admitted. Both of you need to try for it to work, she said. Yeah, I know. Then she paused and said, Jake, she's cheating on you. I froze. Cindy would never joke about something like that. You know this? I asked quietly. Yeah, I know. With who? I asked, my voice shaking. Her boss, Turnbull. How long? I asked, feeling cold inside. Not long with him, but he's not the first. What? Who else? I found out Al slept with her a few months ago. Holy crap, anyone else? I don't know, but one's enough, isn't it? Yeah, more than enough, I said. I'm going to kick Al out. I'm done with him. He's done this before, and if I let it slide, he'll do it again. I'm looking for a job before I leave him. I won't let my kids live in poverty. Jesus, Cindy, can this get any worse? I groaned. I remember you asking me something similar when you lost your job, and Judy gave you hell for it, she reminded me. What a mess, I said, feeling utterly frustrated. Yeah, she agreed. Well, I guess I'll be rethinking my financial plans. No way am I giving Judy anything after this. She can go live with her boss. Can't blame you. Just don't do anything that'll land you in jail. I need you for my morning coffee, she joked, trying to lighten the mood. Maybe we should both kick them out and move in together, I said, half joking. You're forgetting something, Jake. The kids. No, I'm not. If they don't come with us, the deal's off, I joked back, trying to lift the heaviness of the moment. Cindy laughed, but I noticed tears in her eyes. We both needed a release from the heaviness of the situation, so we shared a laugh. It felt good to have someone to talk to. We decided to set aside our spouse problems for the day. I had work to finish, and I needed to figure out how to cope with living with Judy until I decided what to do. Surprisingly, I felt emotionally detached. more disappointed than angry. I even wondered how many others there had been besides Al and her boss. That evening, I acted as if nothing had changed, though it took me longer than usual to fall asleep. I kept thinking about what to do and realized I needed proof. Not that I doubted Cindy, but I wanted to see it myself. The next morning, Judy claimed she had to work late again, which I suspected meant she was seeing her boss. I called Cindy, borrowed her car, and staked out the clinic parking lot. Sure enough, Judy came out with a tall man in a nice suit. They got into a Mercedes, and I followed them to a hotel. I watched them check in, each carrying a small overnight bag. I took several pictures, confirming what I needed to know. I returned Cindy's car and told her what I saw. She hugged me and advised me to cool down and think before confronting Judy. We agreed to talk more the next day. The next morning, Cindy and I had time to discuss our next steps before the kids got home. I was angry and hurt by Judy's betrayal, but knew the marriage was over. There was no doubt about that. I asked Cindy how she found out. She explained that gossip spread through mutual acquaintances. One of Judy's coworkers noticed the affair with her boss, and it eventually reached Cindy through a chain of people who knew we were neighbors. Cindy added that many people were aware of Judy's affair. When I asked how she found out about Al and Judy, Cindy said it was through a nosy neighbor who noticed Al visiting my house when I was away. I guess Judy fell for his talk about being a big deal at work, Cindy said, shaking her head. Cindy then asked if Judy's boss, Turnbull, was married. I confirmed he was, but I didn't know much else. Cindy grabbed my phone book, looked up his number, and called. "Hello, is this Mrs. Richard Turnbull?" Cindy asked. After a brief silence, she apologized, pretending she had the wrong number, and hung up, giving me a knowing smile. "He's married and they don't have any kids," Cindy confirmed. I shook my head, realizing how sharp she was. No wonder I could never fool her. We sat quietly for a bit. "I think we should visit City Hall, Jake. I'd like to see who owns the clinic property," she suggested. "What's on your mind?" I asked. "You might find some leverage. A title search can reveal interesting things. Let's go if you have the time." "All the time in the world," I smiled. 10 minutes and $10 later, we discovered that the clinic's property title was under Mrs. Diane Turnbull's name, matching the home address of Robert Turnbull. "Looks like Mrs. Turnbull has the upper hand," Cindy said with a smirk. "So Loverboy's wife owns the building, and maybe he's just the manager," I guessed. "Exactly. I'll bet Judy doesn't know that. If he's playing her, she's in for a rude awakening when I dump her," I replied. "Ain't that a shame?" Cindy chuckled. We left City Hall and grabbed lunch together. Being with Cindy always lifted my spirits. We avoided discussing our personal issues until we were back at the townhouse. "So what's next?" I wondered aloud. "Did you take the pictures I suggested?" Cindy asked. "Yeah," I said, pulling out my camera and connecting it to my computer. We looked through the photos. These shots at the hotel desk and elevator don't leave much doubt. You could hire a private detective for more evidence, but it probably isn't worth it. Whether you divorce her for infidelity or irreconcilable differences, the outcome will be the same. Save your money and brace for the worst, Cindy advised. "I never thought it would come to this," I said, shaking my head. "No one ever does. I didn't think Al would cheat on me, but he did, more than once. I'm just stuck for now, needing a job before I can leave him and provide for the kids," Cindy said. "I've been thinking about something," I started cautiously. "Hear me out with an open mind." "I'll try," she replied, focusing on my words. "The other day, I joked about us moving in together with the kids, but the more I think about it, the more I like the idea. My income will exceed $125,000 this year. I'm doing well with work, and I could buy a 4-bedroom house in the same school district. You and the kids could move in as tenants until you find a job you like. No strings attached," I proposed. "That's a sweet offer, Jake, but it wouldn't be fair to you. What about your personal life and future? You don't want to stay single forever, do you?" she asked. "No, but this doesn't have to be permanent. If you find a job and want to move out, you can. At least you'd be in a stable environment with the kids," I explained. "Jake, you're a great guy, but what if I move out? What will you do with a big house then?" she asked, concerned. I shrugged. "Maybe you won't want to move out," I said, almost cringing. Cindy's eyes widened. "Are you saying you have feelings for me?" I nodded. "Sorry, but yeah." "Oh, Jake, don't do this to me," she said, clearly conflicted. "Do what?" I asked with a slight smile. "Don't mess with my head. This is too much. I haven't even kicked Al out yet, and now you're coming on to me." "It's not fair," she said, frustrated. "I know. But what they did to us wasn't fair either. This isn't about fairness. It's about what we both know. If you don't feel the same, just say so, I replied. Cindy sat quietly, tears forming in her eyes. She got up, wandered around the kitchen and living room, shaking her head and mumbling to herself. I took it as a good sign. She hadn't said no or gotten angry. She was uncertain, but not offended. "Damn you, Jake," Cindy finally said, walking toward me. "How could you?" Then, without another word, she wrapped her arms around me, pulling me into a tight embrace. When she let go, I stood up and hugged her back. "Can I take that as a yes, then?" I asked. "Of course. How could I say no to you?" she replied, wiping away tears but smiling. "No strings, Cindy. If it works, great. If not, no pressure," I reassured her. She looked into my eyes and said, "I'll make sure it works," then started crying again. I felt hopeful that we could get through the tough times ahead and come out better on the other side. Following Don Simmons' advice, I hired a family law firm and retained Marta Kinsey, a sharp lawyer dedicated to protecting my interests. I decided not to hide my new income during the divorce. I'd disclose everything if necessary, but negotiate to avoid alimony. Marta suggested a bluff, proposing we offer Judy a split of current assets and no alimony, hoping she'd accept without knowing about my new business. I told Marta I'd serve Judy the papers soon, and she prepared the documents. The next week passed without incident, though Judy had 2 more overtime sessions. Marta called to confirm everything was ready, so I called Cindy. "It's D-Day, Cindy. I have the papers and need to figure out how to deliver them. Want to come over?" "Sure, I'll be right there. Get the coffee ready." We chatted over coffee before I laid out my plan. Tonight, I'll confront Judy, tell her I know about Turnbull, and give her the divorce papers. If she resists, I'll show her the photos and mention witnesses. I'll also remind her that Mrs. Turnbull doesn't know about the affair, which could push her to agree. If things get ugly, I'll move out and we can fight it out legally. "Have you packed a bag?" Cindy asked. "Not yet, but I will before she gets home. No overtime tonight," I said with a smirk. Cindy kissed me lightly and hugged me. "Good luck. Tell me how it goes. Once this is over, we'll figure out how to handle Al, which will be tougher." We knew Al wouldn't take things quietly, so Cindy planned to stay in their townhouse until things settled down. I even loaned her enough from Marta's retainer, and we decided to tackle our situations together. That evening, after our usual dinner routine, I told Judy we needed to talk. She tensed up, probably expecting another "we're not close" conversation. "Enough talk, Judy. I know about your affair with Robert Turnbull. Since you don't respect me or our marriage, I'm divorcing you. Here are the papers," I said calmly, surprised by how composed I felt. Her shocked expression was priceless. She gasped for air, coughing and struggling to respond. "How?" was all she could manage. "You weren't discreet. Plenty of people, including your coworkers, knew about the affair." "Oh God. I'm sorry, Jake. I wish I could say something. I'm so sorry." I shrugged. "I'm proposing a 50-50th split. We can sell the townhouse and split the equity, or you can buy me out. I won't be living here again." I remained calm and clear-headed. Judy nodded, saying, "That's fair," though she couldn't look at me. I couldn't resist asking why she hadn't spoken up sooner. I thought she might offer an excuse, but she didn't. "I thought Robert would give me a better life. He's successful, and I believed he could offer more than you could." I considered bursting her bubble, but remembered Marta's advice. "Don't overplay your hand." Instead, I said, "I hope you find happiness. Clearly, you weren't happy with me." "It wasn't you, Jake. You were always good to me. I just wanted more out of life than you could give," she admitted. "An upgrade?" I muttered. "Maybe. Robert is wealthy, and I thought he'd provide a good life after his divorce." "He's married?" I feigned surprise. Judy nodded, looking ashamed. "I'm not proud of it. We cheated, but we were good together." Her voice trailed off. "I'm moving out, Judy. I'll stay in a motel until I find a place. If you agree to the settlement, the papers are here. You might want to consult a lawyer," I said, hoping she'd accept the offer. "No, I won't fight it. I hurt you, and I'm to blame. 50-50ths is fair. I'll sign the papers tonight," she said, still avoiding eye contact. When I returned with my bag, she seemed surprised that I was already packed, but said nothing. She handed me the signed papers, and I checked them before putting them in my pocket. "I'll come by tomorrow to get the rest of my things in my computer files," I told her. "Of course. This is still your house, Jake." She finally looked at me, her sadness almost making me reconsider. I kissed her cheek and said, "Goodbye, Judy," then quietly left. I had won my freedom, but lost what I had once hoped for. It felt like a hollow victory, but I knew I couldn't stay with her after what she'd done. At the motel, I called Marta the next morning and told her how things went. She was pleased. No drama, just a quiet end to my marriage. I thanked her and hung up. I dropped off the papers on my way to the house, realizing it no longer felt like home. I gathered my clothes and personal items, leaving behind anything else. Judy could keep the photos, and we'd split the furniture later. In my office, I reflected on the end of an 8-year chapter of my life. Though I didn't feel great about it, I knew I had to move on. Thinking of Cindy lifted my spirits. I started downloading my files to my new laptop, a task that would take most of the morning. I informed Mr. Lewis that I needed a week off due to personal issues, and he was understanding. I promised to catch up the following week. Working from the motel wouldn't be ideal, but it was manageable. I missed my morning coffee with Cindy, but we were being cautious until she served Al with divorce papers. We met at an espresso shack on Friday and parked in a quiet lot to talk. "How are you holding up?" I asked. "Okay. I'm not looking forward to telling Al. I'll do it in the morning after the kids go to school. It's the only time we're alone," Cindy replied. Marta advised me not to insist he leave if there's no other place for him to sleep. But I'm not sharing a bed with him any longer than necessary. "What about the kids? When will you tell them, assuming Al will be gone when they get home?" "I'll tell them then," Cindy said. "Do you think they can handle it?" I asked. "Annie will be okay, but I found out something that seals it for Al," Cindy said, pausing to sip her latte. "Annie got into an argument with a classmate, and the girl said her dad was a regular visitor at her friend's mom's house. The mom's name is Mimi Tremonte, a divorcee. Annie got upset, but the girl stood her ground and even told Annie to ask the mom if she didn't believe it." Cindy looked defeated, a side of her I hadn't seen before. "How's Annie handling it?" I asked. I calmed her down and told her not to believe everything, but I think she knows. She's only 10, but kids grow up fast. "I'm sorry, Cindy. It's hard on them. Telling the kids that I'm leaving their father won't be easy. They'll still see him, but it's going to hurt." I nodded, knowing Cindy didn't want to deny Al visitation. After a pause, Cindy added, "They asked about you, you know." "Really? I'm surprised. They like you a lot. Having you around will help them adjust. You're more like a dad than anyone else." "Thanks. I'm looking forward to that and being with you," I said. She reached for my hand. "You said you wanted to talk. What's on your mind?" "I want you to come with me to see a house I'm thinking of buying. I'd like your opinion since you'll be living there too." "Sure, let's do it. I could use the distraction," she agreed with a weak smile. At 11 a.m., we met the real estate agent at the house. I showed Cindy the rooms and pointed out areas needing work. It wasn't a luxury home, but it had enough space, private bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms, and a basement for storage or a playroom. "I like it," Cindy said. "It needs some work, but nothing we can't handle. Plenty of space for the kids, and the basement could be their playroom. If you're looking for my approval, you've got it." "Great. Let's make an offer and see what happens. It's been on the market for 4 months, so we might get a good deal." We told the agent we were ready to make an offer, and he was thrilled, likely due to the slow market. I made a low offer, expecting a counter, hoping to gauge how desperate the sellers were. The empty house suggested they might be carrying 2 mortgages. Afterward, Cindy offered to buy lunch, so we stopped at a sushi bar. She joked that Al would never eat there, and I laughed, glad to see her humor returning, though I knew it might be temporary until she faced Al. The weekend at the motel was lonely. Judy was out of my life, and even though we weren't close, it was still someone to talk to. Now, I was alone, and I couldn't see Cindy either. On Saturday, I took a walk by the river for a break, and spent the rest of the weekend catching up on work. By Sunday afternoon, I was back on track, and Mr. Lewis was pleased when I updated him on Monday. He mentioned a special project he wanted me to take on, so we arranged to meet on Tuesday. I also called Cindy, who had heard from Marta that all the divorce paperwork was ready. Cindy was nervous about telling Al and wanted to discuss her strategy. I suggested it might be better to have someone serve Al with the papers instead. Cindy was adamant. "No way. If someone else serves him, he'll go ballistic. I need to do this myself. Maybe I can make him understand how much he's hurt me and the kids. I'm not changing my mind or forgiving him. He brought this on himself, and I'm ending it. I let him off before, and it just let him walk all over me again. Fool me once. That's it." "I wish I could be there to help," I said, knowing she appreciated the thought, but also that it wasn't possible. "I'm doing it tomorrow morning. I probably won't sleep thinking about it. but I can't let the kids see this. I have to face him myself. It's the only way, she said firmly. Good luck, I offered. Tuesday morning, I followed my usual routine, gathered my laptop, and treated myself to a full breakfast at the motel restaurant. I laughed at still being frugal, despite my improved finances. After breakfast, I waited until rush hour passed before heading to Mr. Lewis's office. I couldn't stop thinking about how Cindy was handling Al. She was strong, but I knew this was tough for her. At my meeting with Mr. Lewis, he surprised me by proposing a huge project, translating manuals for tractors, backhoes, and forklifts from China. The scope was far beyond anything I'd done before. I'm not sure I can handle this alone, I admitted. It's a big project, and I'm not an expert on this equipment. Mr. Jake, you are very good at what you do. Can you find people to help? I'll pay $100 an hour. This is a big job, and I trust you to do it right, he urged. He was clearly relying on me, so I agreed to consider it. Let me review one of the manuals and see if I can make it work. Thank you, Mr. Jake. I trust you, he said gratefully. I left with a forklift manual in hand, feeling a mix of excitement and apprehension. As I drove, I thought of Cindy and felt a chill. I grabbed my phone, but hesitated to call. What if Al was still there? If things had gone wrong? I decided to wait until I reached her place. I arrived at Cindy's townhouse around 10:30 and noticed Al's car wasn't there. I called her and she answered softly. Hello? Cindy, it's Jake. Are you okay? I asked, concerned. Yeah, I'm okay, she replied. Can I come over? I'd like to see you. I'm right outside your door, she said, just making sure Al's gone. He is, I assured her. Come in, the coffee's ready. A moment later, I walked in to find Cindy at the kitchen table, looking exhausted, her eyes red from crying. Hi, I greeted her, sitting down beside her with a cup of coffee. What happened? I asked gently. She sighed, shaking her head. He completely broke down, Jake, crying, begging on his knees for another chance. It was so pathetic, it made me cry too. Did he agree to leave? I asked. Yes, though he tried to deny everything at first. When I mentioned Judy and why you're divorcing her, he looked like he was going to be sick. Then I brought up Mimi Tremont and what the girl at school said to Annie, and that's when he lost it. That sounds rough. How are you holding up? Not great, Jake. Like you, I feel like I wasted years. 10 years I can't get back. Part of me is angry, part of me is sad. There's a big difference between your 10 years and my 7, I said. Oh yeah? Like what? Like Annabeth and Bradley. Tears welled up in her eyes as I took her hands and gently squeezed them. Hold on, Cindy. You'll get through this. Cindy finally broke down, and I held her, letting her release all the pain. She was strong, and I knew she'd come out of this okay, even if it would hurt for a while. Tell me what happened, I urged. She composed herself enough to explain. She had Al sit in the kitchen while she told him she was filing for divorce. He tried to talk his way out of it, but Cindy was too prepared for that. When he realized he couldn't convince her otherwise, he played the sympathy card, bringing up the kids and their years together. But his act only made it easier for Cindy. His fake remorse didn't faze her, and she confronted him with all his betrayals, including the ones she had previously forgiven. By the end, Al was a mess. She had already packed a bag for him and told him to leave. He thought it was temporary until she handed him the divorce papers, making it clear he was gone for good. He left defeated, dragging his suitcase behind him. I wish I could have been there for you, Cindy, I said. No, Jake. I had to do this myself. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Don't blame yourself because I'm upset. It had to be done, and it had to be done firmly. Well, I guess we're both starting new lives now, I said. I'm just glad you'll be part of mine. She looked at me intently. Are you having second thoughts about us? Of course not. It's your choice, Cindy. Whatever happens, it's up to you. Jake, that's a cop-out. You tell me you have feelings for me and then you leave it all to me? What kind of man are you? She challenged. I couldn't help but smile, and she couldn't help but smile back. Then she wrapped her arms around my neck and kissed me deeply. I don't think we'll be apart anytime soon, she said. As expected, the offer on the house was countered, but it wasn't far from my ideal price. After a quick negotiation, the deal was done. I now owned a 4-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood. I'm almost embarrassed by how easily I moved on from Judy. I've realized I never truly loved her, not the way my parents love each other. I've learned what real love feels like now, and it's different from what I had with Judy. Since signing the divorce papers, I haven't seen Judy. The final decree will come in February. Rumor has it she and Bobby left with little more than his Mercedes. His soon-to-be ex-wife is running the lab, and Judy seems to have lost her dreams twice. Al is still working at the Chevy dealership, but he's changed. His divorce from Cindy will be final in March. He visits the kids weekly, but stays low-key otherwise. The single life doesn't seem to suit him as much as he thought it would. Cindy, at my suggestion, decided not to ask for alimony or child support. Al's down, and neither of us would find satisfaction in kicking him further. We're financially secure, while Al struggles with mortgage payments and credit card debt. Playing around has proven costly for him. Cindy and I are a completely different story. She doesn't take crap from anyone, including me. I'll never understand why Al cheated on her. He deserves the dumbest man award. I love Cindy like crazy and would fight to keep her. When she says she loves me, I won't argue. I'm benefiting from her high opinion. I'm glad I stay in shape because I don't want to disappoint her. The fourth bedroom didn't stay a bedroom for long. After Cindy kicked Al out, she explained everything to the kids. Annie, aware of her dad's mistakes, took it better than Brad, but both needed reassurance they'd still see him. Brad was quiet for a few days, but eventually adjusted, as kids do. Cindy told them about the new house, big backyard, and that they'd stay in the same school, which eased their concerns. When she mentioned I'd be living with them, Brad cheered, and Annie nodded approval. They seemed to feel the same way about me as I did about them. Cindy said, "Kids pick up on adult vibes." We moved into the new house after Halloween. I took the kids trick-or-treating in their old neighborhood, and they enjoyed seeing familiar faces. No sign of Al, probably something he couldn't handle. I hired movers to make the transition smooth. Judy and I agreed on splitting furniture, and I avoided arguing over small things. Al, now living with a work friend, didn't need furniture, so we took care of it, ensuring he got half its value. I only had to buy a TV for the kids and a few dining room items. With Christmas approaching, I'm excited. I plan to spoil Cindy and the kids, but carefully, to avoid too much heat from Cindy. She knows how much I care about them, and that's made our new life easier, along with the improved Zek's life. Cindy is far more passionate and uninhibited than what I was used to, and I'm doing just fine, thank you. To avoid disturbing the kids, I set up my office in the bedroom between theirs and ours. We've also embraced the benefits of working from home, turning happy hour into a midday affair. As for my career, I found a multilingual engineer perfect for Mr. Lewis's project. We secured a contract to produce manuals in English, French, and Spanish as Mr. Louis eyes the American market. I have years of work ahead, not just for him, but for others who've discovered my skills. I'll need to expand to meet the growing demand. Cindy is my personal assistant, excelling at negotiations, scheduling, and finances. She's truly my partner. And to top it off, we're getting married during spring break in Hawaii, with our families joining us. Cindy's mother, a widow, will be there too. She never liked Al, so I'm starting fresh with her. This time, it's for keeps.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
It was a bright, sunny afternoon in Florida when I heard the knock at my door. The warmth of the day had lulled me into a calm, but that moment shattered any sense of peace. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door, and for a brief second, I caught a glimpse of her, a flash of familiar but hateful eyes. Before I could register what was happening, her thug of a boyfriend barged past her and into the doorway with all the force of a storm. There was no time to react. His fist came at me like a hammer, slamming into my face with a sickening crack. I felt the bone of my nose snap under the pressure, blood immediately pouring down, blurring my vision. Before I could even register the pain, another hit came, this time to my ribs. The force was enough to knock the air from my lungs. I staggered back, gasping, but he was relentless. His fist came again, smashing into my side. There was a sickening crunch as 3 ribs shattered under his brutal attack. I barely had time to comprehend the agony before I felt a sharp, searing pain in my abdomen. He hit me so hard, I could feel something tear deep inside. My spleen ruptured. Blood was pouring out of me now, and I could barely keep my footing as my legs buckled under me. The room spun, and the pain was overwhelming, but he wasn't done. He took pleasure in watching me crumble, each strike more savage than the last. I could hear him laughing, his breath ragged, as I struggled to stay conscious. The next thing I knew, the world around me was going dark, but not before I felt another strike. This time, a brutal kick to my stomach. The impact sent a surge of pain through me, and as I went down, I thought for a moment that I might not make it out of this. All of this, my body breaking under the force of his blows, happened in the span of moments, leaving me barely able to keep my eyes open as I collapsed to the ground. He gave me a concussion and inflicted numerous other injuries. There was no time to react. He wanted me to feel every blow. The strikes paused, and I could sense he was relishing my pain. It felt like every part of my body was damaged. If I hadn't been in good shape, I might not have survived. The last thing I remember was her kicking me and spitting on my bloodied body. I was barely conscious. I heard her growl, "You son of a bitch. Did you think you could just walk away from me? Who the hell do you think you are? I told you I'd make you pay. If you go to the cops, Juan will kill you. Hell, maybe we'll come back tomorrow to finish the job. Think about that." Then, I passed out. I had spent the last 20 years married to a monster. My name is George Brown. When I first opened my eyes, everything was a blur. I felt disoriented, the world spinning around me. There was an incessant beeping sound that grated on my nerves, and I thought, hospital? How did I get here? But the details wouldn't come. I felt a surge of anger and pain, flashes of my ex-wife's sneering face overwhelming my thoughts. Tubes were jammed down my throat, in my nose, and attached to my arm. I couldn't move. I wanted to speak, but I was so tired, so unbearably tired. And then everything went black again. 2 days later, I heard a familiar voice. My son, Eric, shouting, "He's awake. Call the doctor." "Dad, can you hear me? You're going to make it. I knew you were too tough to die." I told them. "What happened to you?" "Eric is a second-year student at State College, studying engineering. He's a good kid, smart, driven, and he loves me. He can't understand why I couldn't stay with his mother. He never saw the woman she really is, the vengeful person I had to endure. I never tried to explain it to him. Maybe I didn't have to. Despite everything, she was a good mother, and that's all Eric needs to see. He's the one thing in the world she truly cares about." I tried to respond, but my throat was raw, dry, and aching. All I could manage was a weak grunt. Eric carefully gave me a sip of water, which eased the dryness just enough for me to speak. I whispered his name, "Eric," and motioned for him to come closer. When he leaned in, I could barely make the words come out. "Your mother did this to me. Your mother." My voice faltered, and I couldn't say more. It was too much. "You and Mom have been divorced for over a year, Dad. You've got to be wrong about this. Sure, Mom can be mean sometimes, but I can't believe she'd go this far. She doesn't hate you that much for leaving her. She says she's moved on. Mom told me she has a new man now. I met him once. Didn't like the look of him. Anyway, get some rest, Dad. We'll talk later. I'll be back to see you tomorrow. Just relax. You've been through a lot. The police said they'll come back for your statement once you're feeling better." Eric thought I was delirious, caught up in some confusion from the trauma, but I remembered everything. I wasn't wrong. I knew exactly what had happened. I knew about Juan. Not long after I reached the hospital, I died. If Eric hadn't stopped by my apartment when he did, I wouldn't have made it. I was lucky they left my door open. I could hear the nurses whispering as they worked to stabilize me. One of them asked, "What happened? Did he get hit by a truck?" "No," the surgeon replied. "I understand he was beaten into this condition. We got him here just in time to try to stop the bleeding." Then, the beeping on the machine flatlined, and a steady, ominous tone filled the room. I watched from above as the doctors worked frantically, trying to bring me back. I hovered in a strange, detached place, gazing down at my lifeless body on the table, feeling the desperation in the air. "Hold that clamp, nurse. That's it. We've got it." The bleeding stopped. "Clear." I heard the doctor say with excitement. Again, "Clear. That's it. He's back." They worked on me until my heart started beating again. When I finally opened my eyes, I was back in my bed, but I felt like absolute hell. A week after the surgery, I was finally ready to tell Eric the whole truth. "Listen to what I'm about to tell you, Eric. I know you're going to have questions, but let me finish first," I said as Eric sat by my bed, looking at me with a mixture of concern and confusion. "Okay, Dad. I'm ready to listen. You look different. Your face, your eyes don't look the same. I don't know. It's hard to explain, but it feels like you're looking right through me," he said, his instinct sharp, even if he couldn't fully put it into words. He was right. My recent experiences had changed me. Dying does that to a man. You're old enough to understand now. The last 10 years of my marriage were really tough on me. Your mom stopped being affectionate for reasons she wouldn't share with me. Our intimacy disappeared. She always took care of you in the house, but to her, I was just a convenient source of income and status, nothing more. Nothing I did made any difference to her. I tried everything. She refused marriage counseling, and my attempts at affection or romance were either rejected or accepted without any real feeling. I lived without any words of love, no hugs, no cuddling, no kisses. She would occasionally give in to sex just to placate me, but for years, I wasn't allowed to make love to her. It was only on her terms, when she didn't have to participate. Sometimes, she'd let me do it if I kissed her, but all day. I know all this is difficult for you to hear, but I stayed with her because I needed to be there for you. She cooked your meals, washed your clothes, but when you needed someone to hold you, to give you affection, I was there. She never saw that as important. She never understood that emotional support mattered. I couldn't trust her emotionally, and now, looking back, I realize I should never have trusted her at all. If I'd known she was cheating on me, I would have kicked her to the curb. I didn't want to be an absentee father. I didn't want to see the truth of what was really happening. You needed me, and I stayed because of that. But when you went off to college, I realized that was the moment I couldn't ignore it anymore. I told her it was over. Diana, I wish I was wrong, but you don't love me. If you ever did, it's clear you haven't for a long time. I finally understand why you didn't need sex from me. I can't ignore the evidence anymore. I see it now. My love for you has been dying for years. There are women out there who could appreciate a man like me. I know that now, but the final straw was when I saw you. I think you've cheated on me over and over. I've put up with your lies and excuses long enough. I refuse to see you for who you really are, but my denial is over. I'm done with you. We're through. We'll sell the house, split the equity and investments right down the middle. I'm not taking care of you anymore. That should leave you in good shape for quite some time. What are you talking about, George? I didn't do anything wrong, she cooed, trying to calm me down. I know I've neglected you, but I'll do better. Think about Eric. What will a divorce do to him? Come over here, and let me make it up to you. It was only with one once. I was discreet. It didn't mean anything, honey. She tried to look seductive and innocent at the same time, but failed miserably. It won't work this time, Diana. Eric's a man now. You can't use him as a weapon anymore, and frankly, I don't care about your excuses. I saw you. I saw you having sex on the dance floor with that gorilla. I saw you go into his apartment, and then leave 3 hours later, looking like you'd just been screwed. I've realized now that you've been cheating on me for years, maybe from the very beginning, but it doesn't matter anymore. I'm done. You're a fraud. You're a self-centered, manipulative bitch. You've been pretending to be my wife for far too long. That's not true. I love you. Shut up. Yes, it is, and you know it. All you care about is your public image. You took pride in how much you could take and how little you ever gave. The only control you had over me was what I let you have. It took real strength to honor my vows while being treated like crap. I tried to do the right thing. But did you ever stop to think about the consequences of your neglect and abuse? She was silent, unable to respond. She knew the game was over. I could see the wheels turning in her mind as she scrambled for a new tactic. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I haven't been a good wife, for betraying your trust. Please forgive me. Give me another chance. I love you. Please, don't end our marriage. It was just sex with Juan. It was only one time. You have to believe me. I love only you. I can't live without you. I need you. You're my rock, she whimpered, tears streaming down her face. There was a time when I would have been moved by this, when I might have believed her. She was almost convincing, but not anymore. Here's a copy of the private investigator's report. I didn't even need to look at it, I said, tossing her a manila envelope. If your lips are moving, you're lying. You've been sleeping with this guy for months, and I suspect there were others before him. You're just trying to protect your comfortable little life. I had him checked out. He's some kind of muscle for some very bad people. I think you deserve each other. He's a vicious animal, and you're a lying 304. This conversation is over. Screw whoever you want. I'm already packed. My lawyer's card is on the dresser. I don't have any more time to waste on you. I'll be fair, but don't fight the divorce. I wouldn't want to send a copy of that envelope to your family and all your high society friends. Her face hardened. You a-hole. You took your time to grow a set of balls, didn't you? You can't threaten me. If you walk out on me, I'll make you pay. You know I'll find a way. Now forget this madness and calm down and have sex with me. I couldn't believe my ears. She still had no idea who I really was. You still don't get it. Have sex with you, bitch. It's over. I never want to touch you again, and I hope I never lay eyes on you again. You are out of your mind and out of my life. I said, walking out, leaving her forever. When I opened my door over a year later, Juan rushed in and attacked me. He worked me over pretty good. He took his time, savoring every strike to maximize the pain. Your mother watched the whole time. She wanted to torture me. He wanted to slowly kill me. Have you talked to the police? Did you tell them what happened? Eric asked, concern in his voice. No, and you won't either, I replied, my voice flat, emotionless. Why not, Dad? He almost killed you. They shouldn't be allowed to get away with this. She's my mother, but I'm ashamed of her. How did she think she was going to get away with hurting you like this? One day you can ask her. Right now, I'd prefer it if you said nothing about me. I want her to think about what I'll do next. She's no doubt looking for Juan to protect her. You should know they did kill me. I died on the operating table. The doctors brought me back. I'll deal with both of them in my own way, in my own time. Damn, I didn't know that. Oh my God. I don't know what I would do without you. I don't know what to say. You're not going to hurt her, are you, Dad? He couldn't stop caring about his mother. I understood. No physical harm will come to your mother by my hand. I promise you that. But I won't rest until justice is done. They took something from me, and I want it back. What's that, Dad? My pride, son. My pride. I won't sleep until I make this right. The vacant look in my eyes scared him. I guess you have to do what you have to do, Eric said, his voice full of concern. I never knew she was capable of something like this. Juan looks dangerous, and he's about 240 pounds, Dad. You're too much of a nice guy to get tangled up with him. Let the police handle it. What are you going to do? Don't worry about me, son, I replied, trying to reassure him. It's better if you don't know what I'm going to do. The nice guy you're describing died on that operating table. Juan and your mother should be the ones who are afraid now. Once I was strong enough, I began gathering the tools I'd need to deal with my ex-wife and Juan. Among the items were a collapsible baton and a stun gun. The clerk explained how it worked to me. Generally, a quarter-second shock will startle the attacker, causing short-term pain and muscle contractions. 1 or 2 seconds will cause intense pain and contractions and might drop him. Over 3 seconds, the attacker will be in serious trouble. He'll collapse and remain unconscious for several minutes. I decided to handle Juan first. I waited for him to leave his condo, and as he turned toward his car, I gave him a 4-second jolt from the stun gun. When he came to, he was cuffed and bound in the back of my car. I pressed a chloroform-soaked handkerchief over his face, and he drifted off again. By the time he woke up, he was standing on the trunk of his car, his hands tied above him and secured to a tree branch. Where am I? Why am I here? Who are you? He strained to make out my figure in the dim light as I stepped closer. Do you recognize me now, Juan? I said, my face becoming clear to him. I've been planning this moment for a long time. Let me go now, and I might let you live. Consider this a warning. You're warning me, Juan? I'm shaking in fear. How many people have you hurt this week, this month, this year? You're a terrible person, and you nearly killed me. If your ex-wife hadn't stopped me, I would have finished the job. You came closer than you thought, Juan. I'm back, and I'm here to settle the score. Was she worth your life, Juan? Was she? Because that's the price you'll pay for her. I clicked open the baton. I'm still carrying the pain from what you did to me, Juan. It's only fair I return that gift of pain. I could see the fear in his eyes. I saw you flinch, Juan. Let's see how tough you really are. You don't have the guts to... What, Juan? You think I don't have the guts to do this? I struck his right kneecap with the baton. He would have collapsed, but the rope held him upright. He groaned, struggling to balance on his left leg, but it didn't last long before I shattered the other kneecap. The pain was overwhelming, and he let out a strange, guttural sound. Finally, he was experiencing the suffering he had inflicted on so many others. I could see that he was starting to slip into shock. We're in the Everglades, Juan. I could leave you here to the mercy of the alligators, insects, and other creatures, but I'll take a more civilized approach. Directly behind you is a pool of quicksand. After I cut you free, I'm going to remove the brake from your car and send it down the hill. Then, I'll walk to the road not far from here and go home, reflecting on the brief time we've known each other. Do you have any last words, Juan? Kiss my butt, he managed to grit out through clenched teeth. I gave him another brief jolt with the stun gun. That seemed to get his attention. When he regained consciousness, I cut him down and he collapsed onto his car. Pure hatred was evident on his face, but I felt nothing. No anger, no compassion, not even hatred, just emptiness. I have a date with your girlfriend, so I'll be going now. Hold on, Juan. I wouldn't want you to fall off and get run over, I said, releasing the parking brake and giving the car a push. I watched as it slowly rolled backward. "Screw you," he yelled, desperately holding onto the car as it disappeared into the mud. My ex never changed the locks on our house, apparently thinking I would never come back. I was sitting in the dark on the couch when she came in. When she turned on the light, she froze. "Hello, Diana. What are you doing here? Get out. Juan will kill you if he finds out you're here." "I think Juan's days of hurting people are over, dear," I said, with a hint of sarcasm. "Sit in the chair over there. We have things to discuss." "I will not. I'm leaving and I'm calling Juan." She panicked. She tried to leave, but I quickly approached her and gave her a brief jolt with the stun gun. Her body went rigid, as if someone had struck her. Her legs buckled, and I helped her into the chair. It didn't take long for her to recover. "Now, we're going to talk. If you try to leave or touch the phone, I'll put this stun gun on your neck for a few seconds. I promise you won't like that." "I know you, George. You would never do that. I'm not the man you married, Diana. Believe me when I say I've become a ruthless, cold-hearted person. Juan knows exactly what I mean. I think I like you better now. What did you do? You're one disturbed woman. Let's just say I took care of some unfinished business." "Okay, I'll play along. What do you want?" she asked, her voice a mix of fear and contempt, her bravado quickly fading. She must have thought I was going to kill her. "Why, Diana? I was fair to you in the divorce. I didn't file for adultery, even though I had more than enough proof. I never tried to hurt you. So why did you feel the need to hurt me?" As I spoke, I nervously toyed with the pin in my hand. "The more I thought about the divorce, the more I hated you. I wanted to hurt you for abandoning me. In my own way, I always loved you. I couldn't handle the rejection. I had to make you understand how I felt. How did one get involved in all this? I met him at a bar. I told him that you abused me in our marriage and I wanted revenge. He was the perfect pawn for the job. He enjoys hurting people. I wanted to punish you. Juan, however, had his own agenda. I remember the kick you gave me on the way out. It seemed like you and Juan were on the same page. I had to do that. He was going to kill you. It was the only way I could think of to stop him. Some of what you're saying might be true, but I remember the venom in your voice and the force behind that kick. You took pleasure in hurting me. The only reason you're still alive is because I promised Eric I wouldn't kill you." I moved closer to the chair she was sitting in, and she instinctively shrank away in fear. I grabbed her by the hair, pulling hard enough to cause pain, and held the stun gun close to her face, firing it several times. I clicked the pin I had been fiddling with, and she heard her entire confession play back from the digital recorder hidden inside it. "My lawyer tells me that a confession from you, backed by the evidence of my injuries, should guarantee that you and Juan will face charges for aggravated assault, kidnapping, attempted murder, and depraved indifference. Some of those charges will stick. You're going to jail, Diana." Now that the recorder was off, I looked at her and said, "I promised my son that I wouldn't kill you, but trust me when I say this. I have a devil on the hunt for you. I won't let you live in peace. Every day, you'll beg for death, but I'll make sure you stay alive. It's time to run." With that, I released her and walked away, leaving her to her fate. Diana left town shortly after. The authorities are searching for her. She and Juan are now fugitives on the run. I never heard anything more about her. I don't think they'll ever catch up to Juan. As for Diana, she's been constantly looking over her shoulder, knowing the devil I set after her is still out there. Diana couldn't shake the words I had spoken to her. Every step she took, every shadow she saw, reminded her of the devil I'd promised was hunting her. She felt his presence everywhere, lurking in the corners of her mind, watching her from behind every darkened doorway. The thought of never being able to escape the torment, never being able to find peace, gnawed at her sanity. It didn't take long for her paranoia to escalate. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't stop looking over her shoulder. She started to see figures in the crowds, shadows that seemed to move with her, always just out of sight, but never truly gone. Her eyes darted nervously as she walked down the street, hearing footsteps behind her, voices whispering her name in the wind. Her heart raced. Her breaths came in sharp gasps. The walls of her mind began to close in. One evening, while she was running through the streets, desperately trying to outrun the fear that had consumed her, she began screaming. Her voice cracked as she shouted about a man following her, a devil haunting her every move. People on the street paused, confused and alarmed by her frantic behavior. Her words were incoherent, a disjointed mix of terror and madness. "He's here. He's coming for me. The devil. The devil's after me," she shrieked, her eyes wide with panic. Her screams drew the attention of nearby pedestrians, some of whom called the authorities. Within moments, the sirens grew louder, and soon, police officers surrounded her, trying to calm her down. But Diana couldn't be reasoned with. Her mind was no longer her own, consumed by the paranoia and fear I had planted in her. The officers tried to restrain her, but she fought them, thrashing violently in her frenzy. She was screaming about the devil, about a man who would never stop hunting her. Her words, though full of anguish, only made them believe she was in a state of mental distress. They quickly determined that she needed professional help. Diana was arrested and taken to a mental institution, her world reduced to white walls and sterile silence. The constant whisper of the devil in her mind became her only companion. The staff at the asylum tried to treat her, but it seemed no amount of medication or therapy could quiet the terror she lived with. She was trapped in her own mind, the devil's haunting presence always just out of reach but never far enough to allow her peace. Her life, once full of plans and choices, had been shattered by the consequences of her actions. The fear that I had instilled in her had taken over, leaving her a broken shell, unable to escape the torment that now defined her existence. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
It's been a long time since that incident, and I haven't really shared it with anyone in my life now. Tonight, with a good bottle of wine in hand, I feel like letting my fingers do the talking. Back then, I thought I had found the perfect woman. We met during our last year of college at a party, and there was an instant connection. She was a stunning blonde with a beautiful tan. Someone who could easily have been a model, like Kate Upton. She had all these incredible qualities: kind, compassionate, a great listener, and had an active social life with lots of friends. Our friend groups meshed effortlessly over the 3 years we knew each other, and some of our friends even ended up dating. Those were some of the best times of my life. At the time, I was pursuing a post-grad degree in finance while she had a degree in contractual law. We both ended up succeeding in our respective fields, but let me tell you, I wasn't too shabby in the looks department either. I'm 5 feet 11 inches and weighed about 190 pounds. I enjoyed going to the gym and staying fit. I may not have been a super athlete, but I had a solid physique. Still, despite my appearance, I was always pretty shy and hadn't been in many relationships before meeting her. We were completely smitten from the very first time we met. We spent the entire night talking, and from then on, we couldn't get enough of each other. We started texting, calling every day, and going on weekly dates. About a year later, after I landed my new job, she moved in with me. Her family was amazing, and I especially got along well with her mother, although her father was a bit distant with everyone. It was a whirlwind romance, filled with incredible overseas vacations, hiking trips, and luxurious getaways. After 2.5 wonderful years, I decided to propose to her, and she said yes. I was on cloud 9. She took the reins with all the wedding planning, and we began dreaming about our future together. Buying a house, having kids, going on unforgettable family vacations. We were excited about all the amazing things ahead of us. And then, it happened one evening. When we both got home to our apartment, I immediately noticed that she was acting a bit distant. It struck me right away because we had always been very affectionate with each other. At first, this happened maybe once a week for the first month after the proposal, but it started occurring more frequently. I probably wouldn't have thought much of it, except that I had spent a lot of time listening to Reddit stories on YouTube, so I decided to wait and observe. These moments of her pulling away would only last a couple of hours, and then she'd go back to being her usual self. However, after 6 months, with the wedding planned for a year later, her behavior became more frequent, happening almost every night. Our sex life was still great, and my relationship with her parents remained strong. But during Thanksgiving, when we were at her parents' house in Louisville, Kentucky, while we lived just north of D.C., she was distant and standoffish towards me in front of her mother. Her mom, being very observant, noticed this and pulled her aside for a private talk. I could hear them arguing in hushed voices, and after a few intense moments, they rejoined the rest of the family as if nothing had happened. I figured I could ask her about it later, so I did, but she didn't want to talk about it. She asked me to wait until we got home to discuss it. I agreed because I loved her deeply and believed we could work through anything. Her mom looked just like her but older, same stunning appearance, only with a few gray hairs and long, thick blonde hair. This detail becomes important later. When we got home, I brought it up again, but she still didn't want to talk about it. After pushing her for a week, she finally admitted that a guy at her job had been trying to get closer to her. She wanted to be honest, so she showed me her phone. As I looked through it, I noticed that all the texts from the times when she had been distant had been deleted. There was nothing suspicious in the remaining texts, but I did go into her phone settings and turned on the location tracker since we had the same phone plan. Honestly, I thought it would reassure me that she wasn't doing anything wrong. Well, I was mistaken. On the second weekend after Thanksgiving, she had a company Christmas party. I had planned to go with her, but I was hit with food poisoning and had to cancel. Her friend came to pick her up from our apartment that night since they had planned for a wild night out, and the designated driver would take care of everything. I told her to have a great time and that I'd see her in the morning. So, there I was, miserably sick, barely able to leave the toilet for more than 30 minutes. Despite feeling awful, I grabbed my phone to track her location. At first, she was at a restaurant, then at the party venue, and later at a bar. None of this raised any concerns until I saw her phone stop at a downtown hotel. At that point, I felt terrible on multiple levels. Physically, I was projectile vomiting from both ends, and emotionally, I was drained. Exhaustion eventually took over, and I fell asleep around 2 a.m. When I woke up at 7 a.m., I saw that she was still at the hotel. Around noon, she finally came back home, and I was feeling better. She showered me with affection, and I casually brought up the previous night, without mentioning that I knew her whereabouts. She told me about the restaurant, the party, and the bar, but then claimed she went to her friend's place to crash for the night. That was the first lie. Over the next 3 months, she started working later and later, 3 to 4 days a week. When I questioned her about it, she became increasingly defensive. One evening, when my fiancé didn't come home until late, I spoke with her mom. I asked about their Thanksgiving conversation, and she confessed that she suspected her daughter might be cheating based on her body language. Her mom also mentioned that their weekly texts had become more distant and less frequent. With all these thoughts and suspicions swirling in my head, I decided to keep them to myself. 2 weeks later, something changed at work. I was assigned a new project that required me to fly to the Midwest every week from Monday to Friday for the next 5 weeks, starting in 2 weeks. It also came with a salary increase. When I shared the news with my fiancée, she seemed genuinely happy for me. Little did I know, her excitement might not have been for the same reasons as mine. So, I went online and bought 4 motion-activated spy cameras for our apartment. I placed one in the living room entry area, one in the kitchen, one in our bedroom, and one overlooking the hallway. These cameras were small and connected to a hidden internet network, making them undetectable on our regular Wi-Fi. I set up a password to secure them and just waited, keeping a close eye. During my first week away, she had her girlfriends over for 2 nights and never worked late. However, on the 3rd night, a guy came over, and that made me furious. I was sitting in my hotel room, screaming at the screen and hurling every insult I could think of. They went all the way, first on the couch, then in our bed. She contorted herself in ways I didn't even know were possible. The worst part was when I called her while watching them, and she heard her phone ring. She signaled him to pause, answered the call, and when I asked why she was out of breath, she claimed she was at the gym working out. As soon as the call ended, she went right back to it. When I finally returned home on Friday evening, I ignored her and went straight to bed. On Saturday morning, I went cycling, not even realizing how far I was going. I was so upset that I ended up biking over 50 miles from our apartment. My longest ride before that had been just 30 miles, but that day I pushed myself to 105.6 miles. When I finally returned, completely exhausted, I took a shower. Later that evening, she and I went out with our friends, had a good time, and consumed a fair amount of alcohol. Was it considered breaking up when the person you're about to leave has no idea? I was overwhelmed by a storm of heartbreak, anger, rage, and betrayal. It hurt so much because I had loved her deeply. It was hard to believe that someone who had once been so attentive was now completely unaware of what I was going through. Finally, I opened up to one of our mutual friends, and to my shock, he revealed that they had all known about the situation for months. I couldn't believe it. Everyone knew, but nobody said a word to me. That's why our invitations to hang out with them had started dwindling. Looking back, I realized that about 3 months earlier, the invites became fewer and fewer for me. So, I decided to make an effort to win her back. The following weekend, I planned an entire weekend of spoiling her in every possible way. We went out for fancy dinners, indulged in pampering massages, and had heartfelt conversations about our future and my deep love for her. I could tell I was making progress when, after her 4th glass of wine, she started to cry. It became clear that the guilt was finally surfacing. I asked her what was bothering her, but every time she tried to speak, she became choked up. I reassured her that if there was something in her past or any conflict on her mind, I was more than willing to listen. If forgiveness was needed, I was ready to forgive and move forward. The only words she managed to say were how much she loved me, which stung deeply, especially since I had 4 separate videos of her and another man being intimate in our apartment during the 8 weeks of my trips to the Midwest. Those trips ended up lasting 10 weeks in total, and over that time, I recorded over 41 hours of footage of her and the man, who I later found out was her coworker. Interestingly, she never had to work late once while I was away. Every weekend, I made a conscious effort to be extra attentive to her, but with each passing week, she became more distant. After witnessing this for 8 weeks, I reached my breaking point and devised a 12-step plan to break free. The first step was to gather evidence of her behavior. The second step was to get her out of the way so I could execute the rest of my plan. I came up with the idea of a 2-week getaway to an all-inclusive resort in Barbados for us. She was thrilled about it, but a week before the trip, I told her I couldn't go and suggested she take a friend instead. I knew it was over when she showed no disappointment at my cancellation. Little did she know, I had already arranged for her coworker to accompany her on the trip. The next step was to terminate our apartment lease, which conveniently expired 3 days into her trip. Since I was the sole signer on the lease, I was in control of that. I also needed to find a job in another town, and luckily, the company I had been helping in the Midwest offered me a position with a slight salary increase. I also found a new place to live in the area I had planned to move to. While she was away, here's what I planned to do. Take her to the airport, then return home to pack all her belongings. On the same Saturday, I'd get a new phone number, change my phone and email, and cancel all my social media accounts. On Monday, I'd completely separate our finances by withdrawing all the money from our joint accounts, closing them, and putting her share in an envelope with her things. I would then arrange for movers to pack up all my belongings and have them shipped out west. Afterward, I would take all her things to her mother's house, which was about 600 miles away. Thankfully, everything she owned fit in the back and bed of my F-250 crew cab. From Tuesday to Saturday, I would give the evidence to her mother and begin my new life. I wanted to ensure I didn't do anything illegal, so I made sure that nothing of hers went missing. Packing up all her belongings neatly was incredibly difficult, and it was the hardest I've ever cried. I'd read countless stories on Reddit about people being promised change after being caught, but it rarely happened. My hope was that she would genuinely confess so we could forgive each other and move forward, but she never did. She came close on 2 occasions, but the secret she was hiding was too difficult for her to reveal. On Tuesday morning, I left our apartment north of D.C. for the last time. It took me 10 hours to reach her mother's house. When I arrived, I was caught off guard by what happened next. I showed up unannounced, hoping to surprise her. Since they lived in a gated community, I had to buzz her house from the front gate. As I drove up, I saw her waiting for me outside. The moment I approached her, I could tell she had been crying. I asked what was wrong, and she hugged me, sobbing. She told me she suspected her husband was cheating on her with a younger, slimmer, and more attractive woman. I was completely stunned, so I just held her for about 10 minutes while her tears soaked my shoulder. Once she composed herself, I asked if we could go inside to talk. We went inside, and I asked where her husband was. She mentioned that he claimed to be going fishing with friends at a remote cabin an hour away, but added that he hated fishing. She shared all the signs she had picked up on, and it seemed like this had been going on for about a year. We did some research and found a credit card charge for a luxurious 5-star hotel just 20 minutes away. A quick phone call confirmed that her husband was indeed there, having a 4-night rendezvous with his mistress. I responded, 2 peas in a pod, and explained that her husband was cheating on her, and my daughter was cheating on me. That's why I came to drop off her belongings and move out. I showed her the evidence I had compiled in a binder, with screen captures of everything. After flipping through the first few pages, she looked at me in disbelief. We embraced and cried for about 30 minutes. Then, she told me to stop crying and suggested we drown our sorrows by drinking 3 bottles of Moscato and fooling around in every room of the house. She grabbed 2 wine glasses and a bottle of Moscato and headed out to their private pool deck. She asked if I was joining her outside or if I was planning to seek revenge. I won't go into too much detail, but for that night and the next 3 days, we were inseparable. We shared a passionate connection, exploring every part of her, and it felt like we reached new heights together at least 25 times during that period. Once those days came to an end, we parted ways with a passionate farewell, and I drove off to my new destination. She kept me updated on everything that happened after. The day my ex-fiancée returned was unforgettable. I had canceled my phone that morning, so when she landed and tried to reach me, it showed that my number was disconnected. She ended up having her lover give her a ride home. He dropped her off and left, and when she arrived at the door, she was greeted by a couple she didn't recognize, new tenants. She was in shock and tried calling me multiple times, but since my phone was no longer active, she couldn't reach me. She ended up staying with some girlfriends, as her coworker, who was married, wasn't able to help her. In her panic, she called her mom, who told her I had come down and delivered all her belongings, including her money, which was now 600 miles away. Her mom didn't mention that she'd spent more time with me in those 3 days than we had in the last 6 months, but she did share that she knew about the affair and that I had moved on. New job, new place, new life, and no longer living near her or our so-called friends. Her mom also told her that she was separating from her father due to infidelity, which seemed to shake her. My ex-fiancée cried for days and took a week off from work, but unfortunately, she sought comfort in the arms of her married lover. Her mom never told her where I was, and I completely severed ties with that chapter of my life. The only remaining connection I had to it was through her mother, and to this day, she has kept our secret. My ex-fiancée was ghosted, big time. The timing of everything that allowed me to leave my ex-fiancée was incredibly fortunate. The lease ending, finding a new job, and my phone plan coming to an end all happened at just the right moment. If any of these events had occurred differently, the outcome could have been much different. Now, after the fact, my ex-fiancée's mother and I stayed in touch for several months. We had both experienced the loss of our relationships and found ourselves seeking a form of revenge against our respective partners. However, neither of our partners ever learned what transpired between us. 7 months after I had settled into my new location, my ex-fiancée's mother came to visit me. I want to clarify, much to the disappointment of many, that we only talked. We both regretted what had happened between us, acknowledging that it was driven by the intensity of the past and the moment. Many intense moments, to be specific. She told me that her daughter knew where I was and was upset that she hadn't revealed my location. She asked if she could tell my ex-fiancé where I was and provide a way for her to contact me, but I requested that she refrain from doing so, as I had moved on to my new life. We had lengthy conversations about the possibility of her reconciling with her husband. She shared that he was deeply remorseful, admitting everything he had done. His confession was overwhelming for her, and she asked how he planned to rebuild her trust. In an effort to be transparent, he provided all his digital passwords and allowed her to see every hurtful action he had taken in their marriage. Though she was filled with anger, she acknowledged his genuine efforts to repair their relationship. She mentioned that forgiveness would take time, but rebuilding trust would take even more. What brought him back to reality was when she confronted him about the affair and showed him evidence of what their daughter had done to me. I should also mention that my ex-fiancée's mother was an extraordinary woman in every way. She made it clear that if he ever strayed again, she would reserve the right to do the same. When he asked her to clarify, she revealed that as soon as she found out about his infidelity, she had a fling with the first eligible man she came across. This revelation devastated him. They both cried a lot and decided to separate temporarily to give each other time to think and determine whether they wanted to fight for their marriage. Eventually, my ex-fiancée's parents sought marriage counseling, and as of May 2020, they are still together. As for my ex-fiancée, she was devastated by what had happened when she finally went to her parents' house to collect her belongings. There, she was confronted with evidence of the affair, which left her feeling humiliated. My ex-fiancée's mother had to remove some inappropriate pictures from the binder to spare her father from seeing them. Regardless, my ex was crushed by the situation. It wasn't until months later that she discovered her mother had my contact information. She begged her mother for it, which caused a significant strain between them. However, her mother warned her that if she tried to find me or contact me, I would release all the evidence publicly on the internet. This insistence from my ex-fiancée to get in touch with me ultimately led her to come see me. She was also upset about the struggles her parents were facing in their marriage. According to her, she was depressed for several months and sought counseling to cope with it. When she returned from her parents' place in Louisville, Kentucky, she ended the affair with her coworker and began looking for a new job. In December 2019, I learned that she had gotten married and now has 2 beautiful twin daughters with a good man. According to her mother, she still lives in the D.C. area and works from home, enjoying her new life. I'm glad she was able to turn things around and find happiness again. I recently decided to get rid of all the incriminating evidence I had on my ex-fiancée because I didn't want to be the type of person who holds someone hostage for the rest of their life. I asked her mother to pass along a message to my ex-fiancée. If I were in her shoes and received such bombshell information, it would have caused me sleepless nights. As for me, I'm content with my current life. Ex-fiancée's mother and I kept in touch every few months at first, But now we only talk once or maybe twice a year, usually just a short message with updates on our lives. The one question that still remains unanswered for me is whether my ex-fiancée and I could have repaired our relationship if her parents were able to repair theirs, but I never gave it a chance. I can only speculate. Our lives have since moved in vastly different directions. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.